Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, especially tonight, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Joel, and I'm coming to Underworld Orange County as always. I've got Matthew joining me from the Underworld North Studio in Toronto. How you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. My second podcast in this break that was not a break at all. Yeah, glad to dive into High Republic. Actually, do an good old fashioned book talk. We haven't done those in a while, so enjoying those.
I know, and Matthew, this is 2024, the new year. As a Star Trek fan, I'm sure you're very excited. Maybe Star Trek will get clairvoyant with us. If you know what I'm talking about, Star Trek fans, you know what I'm talking about.
The Bell riots, right?
Exactly. It's coming. And of course, we have a very special guest with us this week. Looking down there, Dominic. Oh my gosh. Yay!
Hello, it's me. I'm here to ring in the new year and talk some High Republic. This is exciting. I'm glad to be here. I've got my eye on several things that we'll be discussing.
Oh boy, same here. Yes, this week we are talking about that instant classic, George Mann's The Eye of Darkness. It's got drama, it's got politics, Jedi romance, a heroic ughnaught. We ring in the new year with our return to our book reviews and commentary discussions. Format to help our sorry, my tongue got discussed. Review commentary discussion format to help light our path out of the occlusion zone. We're getting out of here. We're driving.
I just wanted to point out, I put a pun in that intro script there. So you're Orange County, the Nile. They're in the occlusion zone. OC. You know. Sorry.
Yes, that's okay. That's okay. I didn't exactly see the bottom of the script, so that's why I introduced Dominic earlier.
Oh, there we go. That's fine.
That's okay. But first, let's get some plugs out of the way. Of course, we gotta get them plugs. Of course, you can always follow us at the Ion Canon Pod. Follow us at the Ion Canon Pod on Twitter, on Threads. Of course, Tractor Beam as always. Matthew, what are you doing for Tractor Beam?
Yeah, Tractor Beam Comics reviews. Comics are Wednesdays. Comics are for Wednesdays. Wednesdays are for comics. So every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time, Chris Abbott and I dive into the comics that came out that day. We did just this past week. We did our delayed Friday edition of the Tractor Beam, but this coming Wednesday we're back at it in our usual time, just talking about I think it's shoot, I forget what's coming out, but something came out like it's a High Republic, Shadows of Starlight.
You don't have your eye on this apparently.
I don't.
Get your eye on Tractor Beam.
My brain is you gotta shift gears. It's yeah.
Matthew's still recovering from New Year's.
Yes, I'm still recovering from
yes
that one cider I had in New Year's. From the Miyazaki film I had in New Year's. Yes,
Boy in the
Shadows
Heron?
of Starlight. Yes, Boy in the Heron, but Shadows of Starlight #4. We're gonna talk about that, and I think that's the only Star Wars comic. So yeah, check that out, and I'm sure we'll have more things to talk about during the course of the show.
Yes, and of course, you can always follow us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord, and I'm so excited because this week we are starting the grand chronological Star Wars marathon. Yes, we're going to try and watch everything on-screen Star Wars that has been released starting Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern, with some Tales of the Jedi episodes.
So you're just going to start, and then you're not going to stop until you get to Rise of Skywalker. There's no breaks, no pauses, no bathroom breaks, no time for eating. You're just watching.
Just the thought of it's getting you going.
Yes, we're going to be skeletons by the end of it.
I'm just getting emotional at the concept.
No, we're going to be doing this once every couple of weeks. So this is going to take a long time. So much so that we actually I've sent you, both Matthew and you, the document.
Yes.
I put both Andor season 2, Mando season 4, the Filoni film, and the Rey film on there because I have a feeling it's going to take that long to finish.
So if like say the Acolyte comes out, does that mean you have to start over?
No,
So,
we
you know, when it's
decided
over, we go
we're just
back to
gonna-
the Acolyte and just
Yes.
start rolling.
Yes,
I
it
would.
does. No.
And then a few years later, the Mangold movie is going to come out, and you'll be like really close. You'll be like, you'll have watched The Last Jedi, and then the Mangold movie is going to come out, and you're going to go right back to the beginning.
Oh man, that'd be something. No, we're not gonna do that. I wish we could have done that. I really wish we could have, but no, we're starting with Tale of the Jedi, and we're gonna just keep going forward. If something comes in between, then we'll add that. But no, I'm really excited for this. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. I'm really excited. So link in the description below. Join us Friday, 6 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern. First part with some Tales of the Jedi episode. And I don't think we're gonna get to Phantom Menace. I think we might stop because that's a bit long. So
Fun times.
yes. Okay, and let us, of course, as usual, begin our show as we usually do with a week in Star Wars. And Dominic, since you're our special guest, what was your week of Star Wars? Any thoughts of Star Wars? Week of Star Wars? Yeah.
Oh man, so I had no idea this was coming. I'm doing this episode
Surprise.
how I would describe it as doing this Hannah style, which is I haven't looked at any notes. I haven't
Oh no.
bothered with any
I
sort of
didn't even
prep or
offer you the
research.
notes at all.
I'm just winging it. So this week in Star Wars, let's see, what did I think about this? So I'm several months behind in most of my Star Wars reading, but what I have been reading lately is Jedi Battle Scars by Sam
Ooh.
Maggs, which when I said I wanted to read that in the summer, everybody told me it's kind of a mid-tier book. It's not. There's probably better ones you want to get to, and I would like to fight all those people that said that to me and kept me from getting to this book earlier, because I'm loving it. I think it's terrific. I don't have deep connections to the Jedi Fallen Order characters. I have not played the game. I've watched it through once. I know who they are. I know the vague, outlines of their stories. I haven't watched or played Survivor. So like I'm truly sort of a noob when it comes to Cal Kestis and the crew. I even was sort of like, I was reading some stuff and I was reading some of the like internal monologuing of the characters, and I'm like, is that what happened in the game? And I was like having to go back to Wikipedia and double check some stuff. But I've been loving it. I've been really enjoying it. It's been a nice, I think I started reading it on Christmas Eve, and it's been sort of a nice post-Christmas, post-New Year's kind of read to, end the year on a strong, and 2023 on a strong note, and start 2024 in a good place.
Nice. That's awesome. I think I had that book too.
I mean, you like what you like. Fair enough. And hearing you talk about it, it is making me appreciate it a little more. I think, but I just think it just tries too hard on some things. And, we can talk about it when you're done. But
Yeah.
I don't remember if I finished it or not.
I've got about 50 pages to go.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying it. I might finish it tonight or tomorrow and sort of feel from there. But I've really enjoyed what Sam Maggs has done with Mann so far. I thought that's been a strong, interesting arc.
Very nice. Matthew, what about you? What has your week of Star Wars been like?
So, two things quickly. I finally started the Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view. Just at the end of Return of the Jedi at 40. Yeah, the Fact Bob.
Hey.
I think the idea is to just read a few stories and then move on to something, and then maybe come back to it if I need a break or something. But I've read up to the Major Domo. What's his name? That guy. Whenever I go on stream,
He has a chapter in this.
Yeah, he does.
From Book of Boba Fett.
No.
Him.
No.
Bib Fortuna.
Whenever I
wanted the mayor's Major Domo.
That guy would be hilarious. No, Bib Fortuna has a chapter, and I've read up to that one. I also read Kristen's Sice Noodles one because I wanted to jump ahead with that one. But yeah, it's definitely engaging. I definitely find myself coming back to wanting to continue. So I might just do that. I don't know. I do have other things to read, but
I only read the A New Hope one. Does this one involve a clue horn in any way?
There's one mention of the clue horn, but to that point,
because that's all I read the fact pops for, is exclusively for clue horn stories.
Exclusively for clue horn. So I will say the best ones so far are the more fun ones, and I do remember that one by I think it's by Matt Fraction, the clue horn caper in the New Hope one. The Bib Fortuna one's interesting. He's a bit he's clearly more villainous and a bit more of a goofy villain than we'd expect. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm sure it gets a bit more serious. I might just jump ahead to the one I know is already going to be my favorite, is Mike Chen's Brotherhood. Um, yeah, with Anakin, Vader, and Kenobi and all that going on. I might just jump ahead and read that because I'm very curious to see what he does with that. But yeah, so far pretty good. Again, I might jump ahead and then move on to reading other things. I've got some other comics, Marvel comics to read. So we'll see. Lots of all these 9 long boxes that are about half full of things I haven't read. So might fix that. That also just a bit of a continuation of the tractor beam, just a thought. Continue to think about dark droids and the letdown, why and what about the fact that the story just ends so abruptly and so quickly. And during the tractor beam, we had this, Chris and I had this conversation, and Jill, you were piping in the chat about how well, as we were sort of, I mean, we got to a point, Chris and I were trying to fix it in the sense of saying, okay, maybe this is what happened too, and this is what happened, because as it's a crossover event, and a crossover, the point of it is to if point for the ending is to really make good on and wrap up all the different runs that are involved in it. And so it should have done a better job involving the ongoing Star Wars run written by Charles Soule as well. This is like Dark Droids number 5. I'm referring to primarily, but the whole run, the whole storyline. It really, there was a lot of room for Afra to be involved, and Valance and Tonga in Bounty Hunters as well. Maybe less so. Vader didn't need to be as much, but to say it didn't really, the ending doesn't really involve them much at all, except for what we might read into it. With some exception of the way the Scourge is able to actually get into Luke, and then he encounters the Force, but only for a split second, or it encounters the Force, the Scourge, only for a split second, and then, spoiler alert, Ajax just has a big sword and whacks him down. And so Chris and I were speculating on that. It brought up this really interesting question, and Dom, you and I were chatting about this last night, and I want to get your thoughts on it some more. And then I've been thinking about our conversation. Charles Soule, he really likes to skirt this line between subtlety and ambiguity at the risk of not really spelling much out at all. And the risk there, of course, is that it doesn't actually make sense and doesn't land. It doesn't feel like a full story. It doesn't feel like a logical, coherent story necessarily. At least a logical, coherent ending that follows on everything we've been given. This is the first time we've really felt that he's done that. And we know some other authors, other storytellers, other filmmakers who do that, unfortunately. I thought the great contrast is where his best moment of ambiguity and subtlety is brought up that Anakin Palpatine Obi-Wan at the end of his Vader run, where we very clearly know the I am your father moment, right? We very clearly know that it's a vision. Anakin Vader is reflecting on his father figures, but it raised up some fuss because you have Palpatine and Obi-Wan both saying I'm your father in this vision, and people not being able to really read that clearly. I love that moment. I thought it was perfect. Where the question though is then with Dark Droids, for example, where is the line then between being subtle enough to make room for readers to bring to the text what they need to do the work of interpreting something and coming along for the ride and being along for the ride and walking with the ride, and kind of dropping the readers and saying, I'm not going to give you enough. Dom, if you want to go your thoughts on that.
Well, what it comes down to is endings are hard.
Yeah.
Like endings are hard. There's a reason why, the sort of standard internet joke for a long time was the third movie of every trilogy sucks. It's because that's the toughest one to do. It's tough
Mm.
to make an ending that's satisfying, and it's why when you get to one that is actually so satisfying, it stands out so much in your mind. There's a reason why the Breaking Bad finale or the Better Call Saul finale looms so large in my mind, is because I think those are near perfect endings. They paid off everything they needed to pay off in a way that was unexpected and exciting. So and it's why I think people go so hard at movies that are or shows that are billed as being the end and not living up to it. It's why the Game of Thrones finale was such a disappointment. It's why some people hit Rise of Skywalker so hard.
They did with Return of the Jedi too.
Yeah, that too. Is because and I think part of the reason the prequel trilogy gets reevaluated is because it ends so strongly with Revenge of the Sith, and so you're able to go back and look at the other two movies with through a new lens. So it's hard to come up with a satisfying ending, and I think that's where some people can do it sometimes, and then some other times it's just going to come up short, and that's just sort of the frustrating reality of storytelling.
I'd like to add my thoughts if you don't mind.
Ahead,
You brought up the Soul Vader thing, and I think with that, that's so subtle because, it doesn't matter what if Palpatine did some weird thing with Vader and he's like the father, even though I know there's like people go like, oh, Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine was going to say, I am your father. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It has no bearing on really anything at this point. It's just, it's a cool little thing to think about. I think with Dark Droids, from what I saw, it's like, is Charles Soule teasing a sequel here? Is it like, oh, well, we might have a sequel if you buy enough, and I'll keep writing it because I'm still writing. So, it is that sort of, it's not subtle ambiguity. It's, hey, we might do a sequel because I'm Charles Soule and these things make money. So it's almost like there's a less than thing to it in a sense. Kind of like, oh, we're teasing the sequel. And with the Vader thing, it's like, it doesn't really matter if Vader's Palpatine's son or not. It's like, it's cool imagery.
Yeah. I mean, what that gets to, and I looked back at the sign to see if it still said season 2, please. Like you've been saying about the end of Ahsoka. I didn't mind it. I think maybe I didn't mind it is what I think a lot of people are saying, but it's clearly about that ending is clearly about season 2. Is that so? Yeah, I mean that does help me appreciate it even more if it says okay, there's more coming. I will say, I mean, one of the things we were going back and forth about, Dom, is I think a few of us have said this, and maybe Joel, you were saying this too. If you enjoy a story, Dom, you said this a few times actually. If you enjoy a story well enough, you don't worry about the rough patches to it, right? Like Attack of the Clones, I know there are rough patches, but I love it so much, and so I don't worry about those things. I don't focus on those things. I will say, yes, I think that's definitely true. I can definitely see that. I think there's a chicken and egg between our enjoying a story and our sense that it flows logically. Right? That's actually part of our enjoyment of it sometimes. So
I mean, this is what they say in writing sometimes is, a problem with Act 3 isn't really a problem with Act 3; it's a problem with Act 1. Because it's if the ending isn't successfully paying off what you want it to pay off, it means you have to go back and set it up better or set it up right. And that can even be true of something where you feel like something better was being set up, then the person writing it needs to go back and in Act 1 focus it more on getting it to that final spot.
Which is interesting because Dark Droids, the beginning is we were saying it's the best crossover. I mean, of the 4, it's one of the high water marks of Star Wars comics. At least the beginning of Dark Droids, the whole crossover event. I really loved it. So
sometimes Act 3 just sucks. That's the other thing is sometimes you can have a really great Act 1 and 2, and for whatever reason, external pressures, just not being able to figure out how you want the story to end. Any number of things can just lead to, sometimes the third act is just meh.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm curious, Dom, when you ever get to read it, whoever's hasn't read it yet. And I mean, one of the external problems was the release schedule. I've been over that millions of times. reading comics month to month, that does wreak havoc on it.
Mhm.
So there's that. I wonder, if someone reads it all the way through omnibus style, if they have a different experience.
And also maybe reading it, knowing where it's going might also factor into that.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
That's true.
I think maybe you watch some of these things with a slightly different eye towards them.
Yeah, that's true.
I know for myself, like I enjoyed Soul's Vader run way more than the trade than I did probably week to week when I remember.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Listen,
Are you good with your week of Star Wars?
Go for it.
Actually, I feel like this is a perfect follow up to mine because my week of Star Wars, or my thoughts of Star Wars, really, are about follow up, follow up on just storylines and whatnot, and how that kind of how you handle that. So I've been thinking of. So I'm kind of thinking of two things. I'm thinking about the stream of Beige Annoy post Rise of Skywalker film. And I'm thinking about Doctor Who. And I'm great. I'm glad Dominic's here. I could talk about Doctor Who a little bit. I hope you've watched all of Doctor Who up to now, so you're.
Oh yeah.
I'm not. Okay, good.
Oh yeah.
So,
I'm aware of the mavity of the situation.
Oh yeah. So there's
Tom is the biggest Doctor Who fan I know.
Oh, okay. Well,
Believe it or
I
not.
might be able to beat
Yeah,
that.
I don't know. I don't know. Joel might talk me out here. I don't know.
Oh, you never know. You never know. All right.
Okay. Well, I'm not talking about anything big finish shit. But so Russell came back obviously, and a lot of people were kind of asking themselves, what is Russell going to do with some of the reveals happened during the Chibnall era? With the timeless child, and the flux and all that. That's kind of the Ray Palpatine of the Chibnall era. If I wanted to, I don't know, make
I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but keep going.
it's lore stuff about the
Sure.
Doctor,
All right.
his backstory and all that. And a lot of people are like, oh, probably just ignore it. It's like, hey, that's what happens when a showrunner kind of comes. They're like, they kind of semi reboot. They don't really reboot, but they kind of do their own thing and just move forward. And he's done that. Russell has done that, but I think but he has somewhat embraced those aspects that people kind of didn't like about Chibnall's era, and have just kind of just weaved it into his story. He's not really making it a big part of his story, but it's there's a moment where Judy Gott was like, yeah, I'm adopted.
Mhm.
I just found that out recently. And then obviously there's an episode during the Tenet specials where he's talking about the flux.
Yeah.
And it's it's this big emotional thing, even though when you actually watch the flux episodes, they're like, eh.
Yeah.
But it's it's like, oh my god,
Russell kind of makes the flux seem more like a big deal than Chibnall did, which is weird and random.
right? But that's sort of the interesting thing I've been thinking about to turn it back to Star Wars. With the Shirimo Beige Annoy movies, they're probably looking at the sequels, all three of them, because they have to be both a follow-up and a new thing. And it's kind of like, is Shirimo Beige Annoy gonna just I'm going to ignore all that and just move forward? Or is she going to look at it like, maybe there is something bigger here that I could look at? Takes these moments in the sequels that, may not have worked, or just maybe not in the actual films, and, make them feel like a big deal in her movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is honestly something I think a lot of Star Wars has done, and Doctor Who has done too, where it's they take moments, make them kind of seem better than they are. And this is across the board. I'm not talking about just Rise of Skywalker. I'm talking about that's how people felt about the prequels, where it's to the still people don't like the movie as individual pieces. They're very much like, oh, I like the stuff around it, and when you talk about it, it's like, oh, it's epic, and then you actually watch it, it's like Anakin's talking about sand. And I'm kind of curious if
sorry,
I don't mind it either. I'm just kind of making an example. I'm just kind of wondering if that's sort of the lesson Star Wars should take from Doctor Who is if you can make it better, quote unquote, or at least if you can find something out of it, try it. It's that's sort of the lesson there.
Yeah, I've joked in the past that for me the real end of the saga isn't the Rise of Skywalker; it's the Lego special, the Lego Christmas special. But that thing, and this is probably more of a function of how it was, of when and how it was written and production timelines and that sort of thing. Makes no mention of almost anything to do with the Rise of Skywalker. It features Rey facing down against Palpatine with no mention of her parentage or grandparentage or anything. And it's it is truly ignoring that whole aspect of the film. And I don't think, future Star Wars storytelling post sequel trilogy should do that. I think you're right, Joel. I think they got to find interesting ways of incorporating it into it. If we use the Doctor Who example, the 15th Doctor, you said he brought up the fact that he was adopted, and he's got a companion who's adopted, and
Mhm.
it seems like the relationship between the Doctor and Ruby Sunday
Mhm.
is gonna maybe revolve around that a little bit, because the big mystery of the season that's going to come out next year involves Ruby's parentage and who dropped her off at that
She's
church,
a Davros child. It's
and all that stuff. So it's being factored into the story, and this could give Russell an opportunity to
Mhm.
address the timeless child, fold it into the continuity, but do it in a way that is more satisfying to some folks. Personally, I liked that reveal. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was a really big swing from Chibnall, and I was glad he went that way.
Right.
Sort of the opposite of how I feel about Ray Palpatine, if we're using the two as comparisons. But I'm really open to the idea of Russell doing more with it. But if we look at the new Jedi Order movie, or potentials episodes 10, 11, 12, I think you have to have the events of Rise of Skywalker have to factor into it in some way or another. Even if it's in small ways. If Rey has a student who is grappling with the dark side, like then it should come up. It should come up both her
Right.
history with Ben Solo, but her own legacy and connection to the dark side. And I know there was a quote Adam Driver said somewhere where he's like, "Oh, I'm not doing any more Star Wars." I think he needs to be in there too. And I'm not in the bring back Ben Solo camp. I don't think he's alive in the world between worlds, but I would love a Force ghost scene.
Yeah.
with Rey and Ben. And I think I've had this sort of like snippet of a scene in my mind for the two of them of there's a moment in the next movie when Rey is feeling down and out,
Right.
and she could be sitting there by herself and say, "I feel so alone," and then you just hear off camera, "You're not alone." And there's the Force ghost of Ben Solo there to, help her through a moment, because it's ridiculous that he isn't there with Mark and Carrie at the end of Rise of Skywalker. He absolutely should have been. And
I think people would have been happier just to know, hey, he's the Force ghost. He's okay.
The Force ghost, yeah,
he's fine.
Yeah, it's very bizarre that he isn't. But so I hopefully that. I don't think you're not going to have Carrie Fisher in the next one. Who knows what Mark Hamill wants to do these days? It might be easiest to get Adam Driver in for a day, the same way they got Harrison Ford in for a day for The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I just want to say, the events of Rise of Skywalker, there are things that happen in there. We talk about Star Wars as a history, and we're going to get into that towards the end of this entire episode. But there are things in Rise of Skywalker that are historically significant, right? Hopefully Palpatine is finally gone. All these resources that he sunk in this fleet are finally gone.
Like exploded. I hope it.
Yeah, all these. The events, even of the Force Awakens with with Hosnian Prime being destroyed, and then in the Last Jedi with the First Order taking over. But now that the First Order is gone, there is this lack of any unifying government that a disappear the ending of the First Order and the Final Order that is affected in the Rise of Skywalker. But there's also this massive flotilla that they have this memory of coming together to combat the Sith Eternal. That's probably historically significant. There hadn't been a gathering that big, in how many decades. And so those kinds of things. But then, of course, Rey's own character journey, Dom, as you were saying, of confronting the darkness within her, both in Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. Like you're saying, the role of Ben. I mean, Poe's arc from protege to
general.
Protege to hothead to general. That will hopefully have some impact. So yeah, I mean, whatever the execution, it's similar to what you're saying with Attack of the Clones or whatnot. For example, there are things that happen in that film that are have repercussions all the way to Rise of Skywalker, right? So yeah, I hope so. I mean, if they're being true to the canon, but not just true to the canon. I mean, I don't know about canon in terms of history, canon in terms of details, canon in terms of character, and that's really the more important thing. And that's just what's weird about this these franchises, is that even the thing that storytellers care about the most, namely character development, and I think that is a fair thing to say, that that's the thing they care about the most, that needs to at least feel consistent with what we've experienced in our brains already. And so that's what I mean. That's another thing when things feel off, is when, well, I mean, even The Last Jedi, I mean, that's the problem with things in our brains. Our perception of that character might be off as well and might have to be challenged. But at least, you know, with The Last Jedi, there's a convincing argument to why Luke is the way he is, right? So yeah, hopefully she, I mean, from what I've seen, she seems like Obi-Wan seems like someone who will stay true to what's been laid down before, but also bring us something new.
And just to add on, like, you know, Dave Filoni is in his new role. This is someone who has, you know, in the eyes of the larger public, if not, you know, everybody, he's redeemed a trilogy once already. And he knows how to pull the big ideas out and how to emphasize them in follow-up subsequent supporting material. And I think if he's involved, you know, not necessarily, he's not writing the movie, he's not coming up with he's not directing the movie, but he might be there in those early story meetings going, yes, but we saw this in Rise of Skywalker. How do we pull from that? How do we make that, you know, impactful? How, you know, is this something we can slide into the story to elevate it? It's all about elevating the story you're telling.
That's so good.
And I was to go back to the comic, because that's kind of where I said I could make this transition. You know, Dark Droids ended flatly, and I don't think that's going to change how Dark Droids ended. But I don't know, Charles Soule could do a story when he's having a better day, and it's like maybe Dark Droids becomes like a big pinnacle for a big thing he does in another part of the Star Wars universe, and then make it more epic.
Let's hope. Yeah. There's such great ideas that are, well, that's a great example. There's such great ideas that are laid down, especially at the beginning of Dark Droids, that in a different time frame when there's more time, and we'll get to that next week, to go into that. Yeah, that's what I was saying in Tractor Beam. Like the idea of droid sentience, Ajax Sigma had the potential to really go into that more than I think any other story has, and it just didn't end up doing that enough. And so let's have more time, more possibility of doing that. So
yeah, and you know, just to quote Dominic and Dave, I mean, we're seeing that with Mandoverse. We see season 3 got General Hux, Daddy Hux, as I call him, Hux Senior. You know, how Council, whatever Project Necromancy is, Thrawn doing stuff. You know, First Orders are coming. Coming. But yeah, that's my week of Star Wars.
I'm just playing with my camera here. Just don't mind me.
Sorry, me too.
There we go. All right. I think.
But
all right.
Now I think I shall hand the Mando talkie stick from season 3 over to you, Matthew.
There's a talkie stick in that.
I missed the talkie stick. That's one. I did like the talkie stick.
You should use the talkie stick. No, let's not use the talkie stick.
As we finally get to Eye of Darkness at last.
Yes, I also have my copy here. 2 copies in the same place. Anyway,
I have Audible, so I can't show my Audible.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, George Mann's Eye of Darkness. There's that guy. The guy, Joel. If you want to point to our logo, at least that guy there, close enough. There we go. Yeah. So that's what he looks like. That's Mark Inro. Yes, Dom. We know what the book cover looks like. We're good. Gonna keep going. So Dom's gonna just cosplay as Mark Inro the entire time.
Oh, you gotta listen to the Audible, because Mark Inro gets like he has this very voice like this, and then he kind of loses it. Like,
is it the same as it is in the audio dramas?
No, it's Mark Thompson who does Mark.
Okay, because in the audio dramas, it's odd.
Fair. Anyway,
Mark Thompson does a very interesting Marky on Row. I'll just say that.
I need to give that a listen to. Yeah, it's true. I remember it being in the Lorna D drama. It was very, very understated. I was okay. I didn't mind it. Is the way I'll put everything. There we go. But yeah, Eye of Darkness. Beginning the first adult novel of Phase 3 sets up. It starts off, with Prater Vetter and his adventures. Not his adventures, but it sets up the state of the galaxy in a way, but also leads characters on a pretty epic journey. We'll start off with overall impressions, thoughts, and feels. Dom, I'll throw this to you first. yeah, Eye of Darkness, thoughts, feels.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking as you guys are talking about, week in Star Wars. One thing I could have mentioned is I wrote my annual 5 great Star Wars stories from the last year
love a good
post
read.
on Hoth Author Press. Thank you. And number 3 on the list was this book. I thought it was just terrific, that it deserves its place alongside some of the more mainstream pieces of Star Wars content. I really enjoyed it. I liked Phase 1 of the High Republic, although I was a little bit tired of it by the end of the first phase. I found the books got a touch repetitive. And so then Phase 2 comes in, and Phase 2 has to win you over again, because it's all new characters. It's a prequel phase. And it did that, and it was so exciting. And I enjoyed Phase 2 so much that it was almost jarring to then go back to the Phase 1 characters.
Yeah.
And I thought that George Mann did just such a terrific job of reintroducing us to those characters, making us care about those characters again, catching us up on where they've been, whether you've read the comics or not, or the short stories or not. And it was just a really sort of thrilling, epic adventure that in places is tragic, in places it makes you want to stand up and cheer. It really ran the full gamut of emotions. So it was it was definitely one of the best, not just it was definitely the best Star Wars book of the year for me, although as I was saying earlier, I'm a bit behind, and also one of the best Star Wars stories.
Nice.
Joel, what do you think of Eye of Darkness, thoughts and feels?
Yeah. So these adult novels, I've always had a little difficulty with. I didn't really like Light of the Jedi. I had trouble with that one. I didn't finish Rising Storm, but that's just more of a me problem. I actually really liked that when I was getting into it. This is actually really good.
That's still the best one.
Yeah,
Rising Storm.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I agree with that. As someone who didn't really read a lot of Phase 1, I did read a lot of Phase 2 though. I actually got through almost all of it.
Mhm.
This was not hard to understand. I kind of followed it pretty well, pretty easily. I didn't feel like I was lost, which I thought I would be. I thought I would be like totally lost. Like, oh no, I'm picking up on what they're putting down more or less. And I'll just say my big hot take, and then we get into it later. I'm now even more convinced that the High Republic is not the story of how the Jedi become the prequel Jedi. I just think that this is showing the Jedi at their best. Good is good, bad is bad, up is up, down is down, and we're Jedi gonna kick them butt at the end, and we're all gonna have a great time.
It's to boldly go where no Jedi has gone before. No, yeah, there we go. Dom, by the way, is staring at my Star Trek Ships of the Line calendar right now.
I've trained my eye to look always in the other direction from it, so I never looked. I can't. It's like the sun. You can never look directly at it.
I hope the Defiance in there. That's my favorite.
Yeah, it's definitely in there, I'm sure. So I'll say it wasn't as thrilling, gripping to me. I don't know why, but it was definitely, again, took me along for a ride, and definitely took these characters along for a ride, and especially, and we'll get into specifics of them, but to give the adult characters, interestingly, some more time in the sun, more to chew on character wise. That's been the concern, is that the adult novels have been more history based and event based, and the adult novels have been more character based. The best adult novels have been able to do both. I mean, all the best High Republic novels, period, have been able to do both. This one is up there. Definitely was able to give us a good sense of what the overall historical story is with the Nihil and the Republic and the Jedi, but also to locate it in Marchion, in Avar, in Elzar, in Porter, in Lena So, in all these characters who we already do know from, but how the fall of Starlight has affected them, and how the intervening years affected them, and different and then of course the events, the ringer that they're thrown through, the reality of the Occlusion Zone, and the stressful, oppressive reality of that. And it's something that is, we see it with the Empire, we see it in some ways sort of the Clone Wars propaganda with the Separatists, but we're there. It's a bit of a new situation, interestingly, where we have this region of space that the government on Coruscant is trying to be benevolent, like you're saying, Joel, and trying to actually support systems and support the system of worlds, planets. And then there's this storm wall, and behind the storm wall is this chaotic, oppressive, anarchist, authoritarian. It's convoluted, but there's very like a pirate kingdom, and that's that's interesting and different, and was grateful to see that. Well, also again the implications of the characters. So speaking of those characters, here's how we're going to do is, the first book is the first chunk of the book. It's organized, I think, in different groups of characters in various locations throughout the galaxy. Then they eventually converge. But for what I want to do is focus on the first chunk of those characters. Let me do that. The first chunk of those characters, or just the first chunk of that book, and the way those characters are grouped together. And I'll go through like kind of the first three groupings, and then we can talk about what what we thought about those, and what comes up for those, and then we'll go to the last two-ish groupings, and I'll say it's Bellenbury and Pell, and then it's Avar Bellin, and then it's Porter, and so that three, and then we'll get to in the second chunk we'll get to how Rill and Quirth meet up with them. But that's the roadmap. That's where we're going, and then of course Elzar Lena, and then Marky and Gira and everyone on Hetzel. So that's kind of the way we're going to go through this, kind of breaking this down into different component parts, but also in a way, hopefully, to bring them all back together. So let's dive in. That first grouping, I said, Bell and Burry, they're knights now, the Jedi Knights. So it's Jedi Knight, Bell's Zedafar. And we see that again in Shadows of Starlight #3, which should have come out earlier. Anyway, and Captain Pell, they're along the storm wall, and they're aiding planets victimized by the Nile raids, and I started with them because they're not the most primary characters in this book. I'm sure they're going to come up more, but so the main character here for me at least is Avar and this ughnaught named Bellin, and they're in the Occlusion Zone. They're in Nile space. Bellin starts out just having a job to do. He's under the Nile thumb, trying to keep his head down, not get in trouble. He sees Avar's example on that planet, and in that moment where even if it's not truly helpful in the long run to that planet, I think that that's a moment, just everything she's able to do. He presents a way forward she presents a way forward for him, and so he commits to helping those trapped behind the storm wall. Avar, she's, like I mentioned, she's grieving the effect of Starlight Beacon, the failure of Starlight Beacon, her own failure. She was off trying to take down who she thought was the Eye of the Nile, Lorna D. Turns out she was just on a wild bantha chase, and she should have been back on Starlight taking care of business. Now she's in the Occlusion Zone. She's undercover. She was the hero of Hetzel, and now she has to be undercover and humbled, and on this journey to relearn the roots of being a Jedi and what it really means for her to be serving the galaxy, and not just her own image, is a tension that she faces. Lastly, in this little grouping here, Porter and his ingenuity in the Occlusion Zone with the Pathfinder tech, and trying to get a message out using that Pathfinder tech from we learned in phase 2. And this time, unlike Light of the Jedi, for example, we see him in action. We see him closer to the Blade, the Charles Soule comic, just able to be out there. He's not just making soup. He can do more than that even at his age. And even though he makes soup well at this point, and that really goes into what he can do, and what's set up from the Blade, that rivalry with General Weiss, and so they end up converging, and we'll get into that later. Dom, I threw it to you before, so Joel, I'll throw it to you first. What do you think of among these groupings? What stood out to you, and what kind of thoughts do you have there?
I think the Avar stuff stood out to me the most out of everybody. I kind of have kind of having fuzzy memories already with the others. So I guess that's what I mean. I bad memory, but Avar's just stood out the most for me. Of kind of like she's getting a humbling, she's getting some massive humbling, out. I think she's like the only thing she got left is her like little tiara thing. But everything else, like she got more brown robes. She kind of got wearing a little muddy, She can't hear the song at the forest. That was a big thing at the end. Spoilers for the ending. Spoilers.
Well, yeah, this is gonna be spoilery, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like she's really kind of come down to earth, which is interesting because I kind of remembered early on phase one, people were like, "Oh, is Elzar gonna fall the dark side, fighting the Nile?" I remember that was a big speculation. It's like, no, I don't think so anymore. I think she's been humbled enough where it's like, okay, she's kind of come back down to earth, or the temple, and sort of like really kind of has learned to struggle, and her little ughnaught friend, which is both cute and fun. Also, Mando, shout out when he goes, "I have spoken."
Yes.
All ugnaughts do that now, I guess. But yeah, I think the Avar Chris stuff is probably my favorite out of all of them because I can't really remember the
Yeah.
others as clearly as I do Avar stuff, which I always felt was very always the most dramatic.
I thought it was always very, very stunning and very believable. That again, we were talking about before, things that happen that get picked up, dealing with that failure, letting go of the hero of Hetzel and grappling with that and saying, "Oh, I'm not," and having to be humbled. Dom, especially focusing on Avar, maybe what are your thoughts? What was your impressions reading through, especially that first part of it?
Yeah, the two characters in the book that stood out to me most were Avar and Elzar, which is interesting because in phase one, a criticism I had of phase one was I never felt that Avar Chris, Elzar Mann, or Stellan Gios lived up to the hype. I always felt they were talked about in the books in a way that didn't reflect the way they appeared in the stories. And this was the first time that I felt those two characters really did live up to everything that has been said about them. With Avar, this is a character who I think probably out of all of them has fallen the farthest. She bears, or she thinks she bears the responsibility for what happened on Starlight the most. She takes that on her shoulders. She says, I was supposed to be its protector, I was supposed to be its marshal, and I got so in my head about all this other stuff that I wasn't there when it needed me most. And now she's grappling with the fact, and she's almost overcompensating for it. She's gone on what is essentially a suicide mission beyond the storm wall to just try and do whatever she can. And while there's great value in that, that's not where she can be the most effective in fighting the Nile. And she's so desperate to do something that she's gone, basically AWOL. And this story is about her realizing that, if she actually wants to help the people beyond the storm wall, she can't lose herself in chasing down these possible leads, only to realize that she's just one person. This solution is going to require collective action, and if she's going to try and do it by herself, she's always going to come up short. And there's that great scene where her and the Ugnaught have gotten this great delivery. They've done this heroic drop of resources to this community that's trapped on this planet under Nile control, and it's like this will last them 2 weeks,
right?
And then they're right back in the same position. And she's like, I can't do this for everywhere, for everybody, constantly by myself or just with my one Ugnaught friend. This requires the Jedi Order as a whole, and it's about her realizing, taking responsibility for her own actions, but also realizing that she can't fix it alone, and she alone is not to blame for Starlight any more than anybody else is. You know, it is really one person who's responsible for that. That's Markion Rowe, and the rest of them, the rest of them are you know, bear some responsibility for not stopping it, but you know, at this point, the time for playing the blame game over Starlight is over. Now it's, what are you going to do for the people in the Occlusion Zone? What are you going to do to stop the Nihil? What are you going to do to end this threat for good?
It's such a human thing that comes out in this novel with her, is you have someone who is known to being the dependable one, the one who can actually fix things. And when she discovers, oh, she can't fix things, she goes dodge, gets out of dodge. You know, I mean, even you know, the Battle of Valo, right? I mean, she's around, I guess. She's not too involved in that, but you know how that everything falls apart there. And you know, and so she thinks the Nihil, I'm going to go out and fix this by going after the Nihil, but still going AWOL and avoiding her actual responsibility. Yeah, here there's in the Occlusion Zone, there's this continued pattern of, like you're saying, avoiding her responsibility by kind of going into hiding, but then you know, because saying, oh, I can't fix this, what do I do? Finding different ways to fix it. That moment on that planet gives her this moment of choice and confrontation. It said, I can't fix this by myself, so what? Like you were saying. So yeah, incredibly human, incredibly well written. Again, credit to George Mann. I think we all agree. His style, his prose, his ability to heighten up the drama, and we'll get to the way he does that for what I think is the climax later. What do you guys think about Porter, especially in relation to phase 1, but also in relation to phase 2, the Blade? You know, it's this 4-issue comic book that it's a small story set on this planet, but we see it here and this is something we can pick up again in the end, but we see the implications of this rivalry with General Vice that does have this payoff at the end. We just see him getting to action. What was like, Dom, to actually see more of Porter Engel that we maybe know and love?
It was good to have him sort of factoring into the main story in a big way. And, you know, he's an older character. He's one of the few characters that was alive for both phases. And so he can bring some perspective to this that younger characters can't, whether that's, you know, the kids of the YA books, or even the you know, the young adults of these books. You know, he can kind of provide some wisdom to Avar and Elzar and Bell and everybody in these stories, because, you know, all of this is, you know, he's been through crises before. You know, he experienced the stuff with the Path of the Open Hand. He dealt with the stuff in that comic book series. And who knows what else he's dealt with that he hasn't. And you know, you see him beyond the storm wall in the Occlusion Zone. He's much more proactive, I think, and much more sort of, he's got his head on straight much more than Avar does. Avar's like running around desperately trying to do whatever she can. He's got a plan. He's got an idea for what he thinks might work, and he's taking specific actions to accomplish those goals. And so he comes in with that sort of wisdom, that experience, and he can provide that. So that was a welcome addition to the story, and he gets just a sweet entrance there on Hetzal towards the end. Like that's you know, I think I describe it, it's like Thor arriving in Wakanda kind of moment. You know, the audience, if this were a movie, the audience would be cheering.
He's the Blade of Bardotta. We don't know what that story's about, but that's okay. We don't quite need to know it, but to say we see him in that comic, what he can do with a lightsaber. We see him in this book, what he can do with a lightsaber. But yeah, that moment where he's surrounded by those guards on the planet, in the ship, in the shuttle, and he does not want to touch them. He does not want to hurt them. You know, it goes back to that board that we saw at the beginning with Project Luminous. Star Wars, not pro-war. The wisdom of age to know to do your best to avoid violent conflict. The wisdom of age to genuinely regret having to take life in his situation. You know, being, you know, in the unique circumstances he finds himself in. yeah, I hope he has more going forward. I mean, we'll get again to his fate at the end, but at least the implications of that wisdom of age going forward. Joel, what do you think of Porter in this book?
I actually honestly forgot that Porter was in phase 2. And I read most of phase 2.
Yeah,
There's a lot of characters.
mainly
I know.
just one comic. He's on Dalna too, right? He gets to Dalna. Trying to remember.
I remember I might not have read
maybe.
that book.
But yeah, the main thing is the Blade comic book. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't read that one. I didn't get to the Blade, sadly.
It's good. You
No,
should read it.
but no, I mean, I felt all the Jedi were really interesting. I want to go back to something Dominic said though about Avar for a second.
Sure.
Because I think this is the first time I felt for her as a character. Even though I only read Light of the Jedi, which she was in kind of both primary, I thought, oh, just like she's just the cool female Jedi who hears the Force as a song.
Mhm.
I didn't get much out of that. I didn't read the comics. I know she's bigger in that, so I didn't get a sense of that. But like, yeah, they did a really good job for one book. Like, oh, okay. And I like this version of Avar, the humbled one, who's not
Yeah.
all sparkly.
It's more relatable, right?
Right. Very more relatable. But yeah, I like the moments with Porter quite fine. Just kind of what they're doing. I like all the desperation in the Occlusion Zone. It's like
Mhm.
it's like this is like a little mini or post Order 66 world where it's like they're just trying to survive. The only difference is, of course, out there is a republic with a full on Jedi council and 10,000 Jedi out there to help them. But like in here, it's like no, this is a little mini taste of what all of the Jedi are about to face in a couple hundred years. So good luck with that. And the Nile are like proto the Empire. So good luck with that. But yeah, I thought that was all interesting and cool.
Yeah, and one thing, Joel, you picked up on, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. Maybe I'll just need to spend more time with it. Avar, hearing the Force as discordant and out of tune. I sort of thought of it as not so much. Maybe this is kind of, I don't know what Thrawn will think about this too. I don't know. Dissonant, out of tune, more like jazz, just blue notes. If you guys know what that reference means, in terms of jazz has a lot more kind of colorful notes that don't necessarily make it as serene and stable, but could be more interesting and more conflict and crunch that are more interesting. It is in a way the difference between the glowing sheen of the prequels versus the really gritty lived in of the original trilogy. I love both. I think both are interesting. Obviously, Avar in this is, again, like I say, more relatable. Yeah, I wonder what it means for her. I guess what it means for her. The thing, just thinking about this now, that's the question, the character's question. What does it mean for her? Let me word it actually. That the Force that she knows is about out of tune and out of whack. It gets at the same thing that the Nameless represent and the Leveler represents that we saw in phase 2. That the thing they find familiar and comforting, that's askew. The Force is askew, and so she has to. What does she depend on? She can only depend on her training, depend on what she knows, still depending on the Force, but without the ability to have mastery over it all the time. And so, we're gonna, we fumble around, we figure things out. It's this terra incognita for her that really is why it pushes. So, okay, maybe I've answered my own question, but that happens. But Joe, what were you gonna say there?
I was gonna say, in terms of Thrawn, Thrawn's the guy who does only see the Force as, oh, you can lift rocks with your mind. Good, we need a rock thrower. Throw the rocks at my enemy, please.
No, I was saying, like, what if the musical metaphor and what?
Oh, the musical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's sort of the interesting thing, and that's sort of something I don't want to turn this too much into this because we could be here all day.
Yeah.
Is that the Force right now is more in balance than it is in the original trilogy, and even the post original trilogy, sequel trilogy era. Because I'm of the opinion, and I think we have to kind of be of the opinion, because otherwise it will just make our heads hurt, that the Force being in balance doesn't mean global peace and harmony.
Hmm.
The Force was out of balance during the prequels and the Clone Wars because Palpatine just really got everything so out of whack. It's like it was bad. Like Palpatine is that once in a lifetime dark enemy. And I remember somebody talking about, if Darth Maul had been the bad guy in the George version of Episode 7, it's like, yeah, Darth Maul would have done bad things. He got Darth Maul, but Darth Maul is still like tiny compared to what Palpatine and his evil
Mhm.
machinations were doing. And you can even kind of make the argument that Palpatine is not truly in a fully formed state of power in Episode 9. We'll get to that with the whole other discussion, though. So I think that yes, there's bad things happening, but I do think that you can still hear the song. The Force at this point is still pretty balanced. The Sith
Hmm.
have not gotten as powerful as they're going to get in another 100 years. Maybe Acolyte will start showing the Sith
Yeah.
starting to really start ramping up their power base here. And then obviously when the Emperor is defeated the first time on Endor, that I think that yeah, you can technically come back. I don't think he is as fully powerful enough that
Right.
the dark side rebalance itself back to the dark. I do think the galaxy does, the Force does find that balance.
Yeah.
But I don't want to turn this into a balanced Force discussion too much.
But your point there being, there's still the government on Coruscant is still generally, well, I mean, this is that so that question that came up while we were reading this, this book, and we'll get into this very soon. This book trusts the institution of the Republic and the Chancellor
Right.
and the Jedi in a way that later stories might not. So, or that other story, the prequels don't, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that is an example of it. So, yeah, that she can still hear the Force, she can hear the song. It's starting to be tweaky, but yeah, that's a good point. Dom, do you have any further thoughts on all that?
No. I
Fair
think you
enough.
guys put it as best.
Fair enough.
as you can.
So, as promised, then we can move on. Sorry, I need to breathe through my diaphragm. As promised, moving on, and we're gonna get to the Nile themselves after this. Talking about Elzar, Lena on Coruscant. This, I think a lot of us found this actually the most interesting part, at least of the first chunk of the book here. We have Elzar's personal struggle. He's grieving the loss of Stellan and the distance from Avar. He is grieving his own failure to uphold Starlight, even though he did his darndest for sure. Except for killing it was a Chancellor. That he's definitely grieving that and feeling guilty about that. He's struggling, like we saw in Shadows of Starlight, and I think in Tales of Light and Life. The expectations of leading, of taking on leadership, being like Stellan while also remaining himself. And that's this thing he has to navigate. That Stellan left him an example, and he's starting to live into that more than he had before. That when Stellan could just be there, and Elzar could be drinking, hooking up with whoever on Valo, and being, and not that that's necessarily bad, but when you have responsibilities, then it's bad. He's taking more responsibility while also being true to his own ability to see past just the box and think outside the box. Also, we have Lena. So her personal struggle, her son is trapped in the Occlusion Zone, and that adds to some desperation. That remind me a bit of Keon Greylark in the way with Axel, how with the steps she takes. Lena takes different steps, but similar sort of impact, the personal impact of having your son out there. So Elzar and Lena and others, they're tasked with how to respond to just the existence of the storm wall, which they hadn't had to before, and there hadn't been really any kind of precedent, as far as we know, in in this Galactic Republic for that kind of challenge, and the challenge of the Occlusion Zone. What to do? How do we end this? How do we go help these planets that are struggling? How do we stop this threat to our institutional viability? One great scene I love. I'm always here for a Jedi Council scene. I'm one of those Jedi Council nerds. there's a Jedi Council scene that is this beautiful mirror, amazing mirror to the Light of the Jedi Council scene with Jorah O'Malley. This is from Elzar and Lena's perspective. And they're requesting the Jedi aid to combat the Stormwall, but the Republic Defense Coalition, they're going to go ahead anyways. They do end up getting the Jedi help somewhat, but there's still that tension there. Are the Jedi going to go? And what are the Jedi going to do? And Joel, I think this gets a little bit at your question of, are the Jedi, what's the relationship between the Jedi in this time period and the Jedi in the late Republic? And is there a direct line, or is it more convoluted than that? And then, of course, Yoda and Aslan Rel show up during that council scene, and this brings up this whole off-screen thing that we don't see in this novel at all. Really, is what to do about the Nameless. We see the Nameless. We see Proctor Vetter's execution, and we'll get to that later. But we're told that Yoda and Aslan Rel are still on the case. So is Reith Silas, Miro Lux, and Amadeo Azazo, Maria Reith, used in the Witness of History, the Lessons of History, but that's off screen. That's not the focus of this novel. So that's Elzar and Lena on Coruscant. Dom, I'll throw this to you. What'd you think of this whole part of the book?
Yeah, this was my favorite part of the book was their interactions, because you have someone in Elzar who's dealing with basically survivor's guilt and imposter syndrome rolled into one, and you have Lena So, who is supposed to represent the unflappable, perfect future of the Republic, and here they both are dealing with a situation that is definitely beyond what either of them ever thought they were going to have to cope with. And yeah, Elzar is, you're right, he's grieving both the death of Stella and just the disappearance of Avar, and so he's trying to be both of them. The novel really emphasizes the Stellan side of things, but I think he is also trying to emulate Avar as well. He's trying to think, what would these two do? And he's constantly trying to take action, and he still kind of does it the Elzar Mann way, which is he kind of rushes into it without thinking everything through, and as a result, things go horribly wrong in one of the the most devastating sequences of the book. Lena So is harder to read, right? Because she has a very personal connection to what's gone on, and it looks terrible for her as a politician. She was Starlight, she was the Starlight Beacon Chancellor, she was the Republic Fair Chancellor, she was the these great works, this grand expansion, and all of it's just come crashing, burning down in her face. And so now, how does she become the War Chancellor essentially? And we're sort of seeing her, and it's never quite clear if she actually is the right person for this job, because we're still in a place where we want to trust her, we want to believe in her, but honestly, she hasn't had much success in anything. Everything she's done is kind of blown up in her face. Markian Ro has been 2 steps ahead of her the entire time. He's been winning every chess match they've had, and so does Lena So make it out of this story as the Chancellor? I don't know. But I think Elzar, one thing we've always been told, but never actually seen in these stories, is that Elzar Mann, Stellan Gios, and Avar Kriss were strongest when they were together. And I think reuniting Avar and Elzar is a sign that for both of them, that they, going into the next books, are going to be in a stronger starting place than they were at the beginning of this book. So I thought, yeah, like I said, I thought this was sort of the best part of the story. I think the story, the novel, sort of rises and falls with Elzar Mann, and yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, I agree. It was really fascinating, again, to tell this political story from a very character-driven perspective, and that's always the big challenge. We could, again, I brought this up, I'll bring this up again, to tell the larger historical narrative. What does it matter to these characters? It's funny you mentioned, that Lena, she hasn't gotten a win. Can someone get her a win finally? And it's just like, you got the Jon Stewart's on the hot seat. Here's a politics story for you. Vote of no confidence in the Senate or something. I don't know if it'll go that far, but yeah, it's a good point. She does show a lot of courage under fire and grace under fire. I will give her that. Um, again, yeah, Markian, maybe and Markian's just that good and that smart. Maybe she isn't as clever. Maybe she isn't as sharp. Yeah, it's a question with politicians, right? You have kind of good leadership skills, but not always the smartest policy, or they're just in the dark. Or you can have good policy, but not the best leadership skills. And you can need both. You do need both. Joel, what'd you think of this whole Coruscant plot line?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I never thought about Lena So not making it out of this.
Neither did I. So
I mean, is she gonna be Lyndon Johnson in this Vietnam, or is this Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis? And either way, it's not good for Lena So, because if she's Kennedy, that's actually worse.
I was just thinking Valorum, but
I was thinking more the Texas grassy knoll for Lena So. But
see, I don't know.
That'd be dark. But yeah.
Here in Westminster parliamentary systems, Joel, we do have this thing of no confidence.
Oh, I know. I just wonder. I mean, they have said Camelot in the past, so but yeah, I really liked it. I know. And I really liked it. It was really good. You're talking about the stuff with the Republic. I don't know. Again, this is a different time. People. I think we as fans have kind of, I think over the recent years, have overly blamed the Jedi for their own downfall in the prequels, and whether or not that was George's intention or not with those films. But we always kind of forget the fact the Chancellor was a Sith Lord, and he was actively trying to kill them all. So, this was the biggest backstab in the world. You can't really blame the Jedi. Palpatine just played them really good. Lena So is not. Unless that's like the big twist. I don't think Lena So is a Sith Lord. I think
that would be
terrible. I hope not. That would be terrible. I think she's genuinely pro the Jedi. Even the more militaristic senators from Phase 1, they're pretty pro the Jedi. They are. They might not like the Jedi, might get worried about over reliance, but no, we like the Jedi. We want them around. They're our guardians. They are the guardians of peace and justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Palpatine, who is a Sith Lord trying to kill everybody. So there is that kind of that difference as well. Also, they talk about a lot about the Republic's got other things to worry about too. The Nile. How big is this Nile problem? Compared to that Clone Wars, where the Clone Wars is everywhere. It's everywhere. Attack Coruscant. It got to Coruscant. There was a big battle over Coruscant. Something that hadn't happened in 1,000 years. The Nile thing. It's kind of in the outer rim. Got Ariadu though, so that's got Tarkin's homeworld. But maybe that's how Tarkin's family comes to power. They fight the Nile and kick its butt. But it's there's other problems right now. I don't want to talk about real world stuff too much. But those wars are terrible. But it's you see small if you're not turning on the news. And of course, I do love the Yoda. It's Aslan, right? From Narnia.
Aslan Rel, yeah.
Aslan Rel stuff. But again, it's what makes this guy just not a Sith? He's a dark sider, but he's not calling himself a Sith. I mean, okay. What do you have to do to get the card? I'm a Sith. I joined the club. I'm a Sith now. It's because again, it's that whole thing of there are dark siders and Jedi who follow the dark side, but Jedi follow the dark side. Yeah, but but the Sith, they've been gone for 1,000 years. We haven't seen them. No Sith around here. But this dark side guy, third time a dozen. So again, it's that thing that just driving me nuts right now. What do you have to do to get the membership card to be a Sith Lord?
I mean, he has. I was gonna say you have to do a massacre. He's done the massacre. In Shadow of the Starlight. I will in number 1. I will
He's
say
not calling himself Darth Aslan.
I will say though. I mean, the thing with him though is he's very singularly focused on defeating the Nameless and getting them out of purging them from the galaxy really. And because of what he experienced at the end of Phase 2, and so that's just driving him more than anything that the Sith would drive the Sith, namely power and securing their own person. There is common ground with the Jedi in this context, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe he doesn't even know where to go find a Sith. Who knows?
There
Maybe.
should only be 2 of them. There should only be 2.
Yeah, and they're in hiding. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see more of Aslan. We're going to see more of, like I said, this is off screen. Definitely got it. Can't wait for my guy Reith to take care of things here with the Nameless and find a way through. But not so much the focus of this book. Dom, do you have any further thoughts on Elzar Coruscant? We're going to get to Gira in a minute.
Yeah, I mean that's the other sort of
Yeah.
piece of this is how does she factor into
Yeah,
it? You know, it's people trying their best in an impossible situation, and the reality is they're going to make mistakes. We want them to be perfect. We want the Jedi to be perfect. We want our leaders to be perfect, but they're figuring this out as much as anybody else, and they, you know, they have to take chances, and when you take a chance and it works, you look like a genius, and when it doesn't, you look like a bozo. And unfortunately for the characters, there's a couple of points where they come out looking like bozos.
Yeah, I hope Leia Sos doesn't get removed. I hope she gets to win in the end. Like, they built her up so much. Like, I think she deserves her win.
One thing, you know, you were bringing up the Palpatine comparison, Joel. Like, one thing that might be interesting is if, and this has kind of already happened with the, you know, the Guardian Accords, or the Guardian Protocols, I should say. You know, maybe to, you know, deal with this crisis, the Senate gives Lina So some extra powers.
Yeah,
and you know, she's a good person. She gives them back when the crisis is dealt with, but you know, that just that simple act of giving it to her makes it easier down the line for them to give it to other people, and we know where ultimately that leads us.
Yeah, but Dom, sorry, I was gonna make a joke, but go ahead.
That would be interesting. It's sort of like, because the one thing I kind of don't want to happen is I don't want this Nile crisis to be a cis plot, like, secretly. I kind of just want, like, you know, like, if the Sith take advantage of this, it's because, oh, well, they didn't see this coming. Like, oh, okay, this is happening right now. Like, I don't want, like, Marchion Road to be, like, a Sith secret puppet or, like, whoever the Stark Lord at the time. I kind of want the Sith just to be looking back and, like, oh, wow, all this is happening.
Yeah. And that's sort of what I'm saying with this. Like, I don't think the Sith are I don't think, you know,
no.
The Darth Plagueis' master is out there is, like, orchestrating this so that he can, you know, ultimately take control. I think this is something that, you know, Palpatine's brilliance in the prequels is that he comes in and he takes advantage of a bad situation. And I think this is this could be a stepping stone on the road to that destination, which is what we've seen a lot of the ways with the Jedi over the course of the story, is that they have been you know, we're seeing the stepping stones to where they wind up in the prequel era.
Palpatine takes like inspiration from the Nile. Like, okay, let's do the Nile, but bigger and maybe a little bit more organized. With droids.
Well, I would love to see, you know, a story that centers on the Sith that are alive in this era. It could just be a short story. It doesn't have to be a major story. It doesn't have to factor into anything. But I'd love to know what they think of what's going on. I'd be very interested in that.
I mean, well, I think is it Star Wars explained, Alex, saying, you know, the Guardian Protocols, what they do is, one of the things they do is they give Palpatine a sense of, oh, this is what the Jedi do in a crisis. Oh yeah, let's use that. We can at least predict precisely what they're going to do. That's what he's going to say. The joke, Dom, I'm going to test your Canadian history here on the spot. Emergency powers, is that going to be like troops on the street? What was Pierre Trudeau's line? Just watch me. Yeah, that's a good line. But yeah, there's an example, right? You know, emergency powers in democracies can actually be useful. That was the example. There is the FLQ crisis. There were the British in Quebec, you know, extreme Quebec nationalists capture, or they assassinate the British High Commissioner, and you know, there is a genuine crisis, and there are very clear rules around what you can do and how you can use these emergency powers, and there's always a review. I mean, the last one, his son used them during COVID, I believe. And
the convoy.
The convoy, yeah. So more recently, and so, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see this good thing, this useful thing. I don't know if it's necessarily good, but useful. It's the opposite of vote of no confidence, right? It's let her actually take charge and do what she needs to do. That might put her into more conflict with the Jedi. I don't know. Because the Jedi also have the Guardian protocols where they're going to want to be strictly reserved what they want to do. Which of course is the situation that Palpatine also uses, right? He says the Jedi, they're going to be so defensive about what they want to do that puts them out of touch with the rest of the galaxy.
It'll also be curious, like, what does Palpatine do when he gets his emergency protocols? He gets this mysterious clone army that just showed up. They just totally don't have brains in their chips that are gonna go kill the Jedi.
No, who would
Like
think of that?
Lena So, yeah, Lena So, probably won't, like maybe she'll just like army he has, the defense coalition, but like we can bypass some of the more bureaucracy and it's like let's just go at it.
Sure, she doesn't have a standing army.
Right.
The RDC is not a standing army. It's a coalition. And there isn't a standing army. There can't be a standing army until the Grand Army of the Republic.
Right.
So that. Any last thoughts on the Coruscant stuff before we go straight to the Nile? Good to go over there. Marky and Ro, Gira, General Vice Shrike, Real Dyro, lumping her in there too because she's part of this story. So Marky and Joel, you bring up he's getting more angsty in this new position of power. Starlight has fallen. He has claimed responsibility. He's had this year to do what he wants, and then of course there's the Stormwall, the space to do what he wants. Joel, I'll ask you to explain this. Is he the dog that caught the car and now doesn't know what to do? So he's kind of restless there. And he's getting visions of, and this is an interesting thing that doesn't get picked up in this, that better get picked up. I really hope so. Getting visions of Asgard is that, and getting visions of Grandma. I don't know if she's Grandma Marta, but mentioned off the top, not with any kind of affections. A Marta Rowe, the mother of the Nile. Come on, I mean, yeah, she's Grandma. We all love her. That's probably why. The way Marta and Yana were haunted by deceased loved ones, but Yana was haunted by her girlfriend, and Marta Kevmo was haunted by Kevmo during Path of Vengeance, especially. And yeah, so the Occlusion Zone, as mentioned before, it's this Mad Max Nile haven. It's both this chaotic pirate kingdom that underneath it has this very strong organization that is out to consolidate power. And it's fascinating that there's an internal tension there, but also is the way they're going about business is very, very ruthless and very with the sense that these storms, they have their freedom, but it's a rule by fear as opposed to any kind of institutional rules, regulations that maybe. We got that ghastly execution of Patra Vetter by the leveler that Real has to broadcast as this amazing thing. Look at the Nile standing up to the oppression of the Jedi. Does that sound familiar? And on screen broadcast for the whole galaxy, this horrible event. And then what we brought up, this tension between Markian and Gira and the struggle. Gira wants to be more respectable, be more organized, and be more rule bound, and introduce the rule of law to the Nile effectively, or at least try to, and to struggle almost this parody, if you will, of the thing I keep bringing up with Mon Mothma and Leia. After the rebellion, they're trying to form a government. This is in life debt. After the fall of Starlight, is it now time to form a government out there? And of course, Gira, as mentioned, she goes to Coruscant. She says, "We're gonna have peace. Give us a Senate seat. Give us a peace treaty. Let us do our thing, and I will present to you a more peaceable partner in the galaxy, or at least do what I can." She's rebuffed. Elzar and Lena say no, or Lena especially says no. Elzar doesn't have authority to, but Lena says no. That of course then plays into Markian's hands. Look what the Jedi do. We'll get to what he does in response just in a little bit, because that's the real climax of the book, I think. At least the most a major climax of the book. But then there's Real Dyro, and she had been on Valo. She was there, in good stand with the Chancellor and everyone. she happens to be behind the occlusion zone, behind the storm wall. She's now on Hetzel. She's forced to do propaganda, forced to sell her soul to keep herself alive, and so in order to save herself and actually save her integrity, and actually just escape, she's sending these secret messages, embedding them with she's helped by a Nile underling with Meglar, who he just wants out. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to be told what to do, which is kind of fair enough, I guess. But yeah, she ends up, she's sending those messages out. So yeah, that's the Nile. Joel, I'll ask you to talk about Marky and caught the car. What do you mean by that? The dog that caught the car now doesn't know what to do.
Yeah,
And
first I'm
Marky's
just going to
character
highlight some of
generally.
these good comments we've been getting.
Yeah.
Rose speech about losing because he has to become a politician was great. Double Media also thinks, though, that the sync is too soon for them now to be falling apart. Also, he wants Eldar and Aor to leave the Jedi, settle down, maybe take a lake on Naboo. Take a house on the lake on Naboo. Yeah. I wouldn't mind that either. But yeah, Markion, Markion's not Palpatine. He's not Dooku. He's not Thrawn. He's sort of a villain without he kind of just does. He does things. I mean, Joker was more calculating, I think, than Markion wrote at times. He's sort of impulsive in a lot of ways. He is this weird, impulsive leader. In a lot of ways, weirdly, he is kind of what I kind of would assume Kylo Ren as Supreme Leader of the First Order would have been like. Except if the Nile was a bit more First Orderly, which I guess it kind of is to a certain extent. But just maybe not as organized, or even maybe just as organized. I don't know. But just kind of he does it out of impulse. It's like, I'm mad, so we're gonna do this. Like, I love the audiobook because it's like he kind of talks like this, and the Jedi, he hates them. It is very angsty.
So that's what he sounds like. Mark Thompson does it, eh?
Yeah, I hope I find a clip. But yeah, get the audible. It's great. But then other times he's very quiet before he's about to shout. But yeah, he's sort of like he's got all his territory, got a rule, and it's like kind of like, well, didn't see this coming. I don't think he ever expected to get this far. It's not like Palpatine, who like always wanted to rule, even though he didn't really want to do any of the actual work of ruling. Where I mean, it is kind of like Palpatine, where it's like Palpatine wanted to get all the power, but he didn't want to do all the responsibilities. Like, Tarkin, you do all the hard work. I'm just gonna sit here and be all evil and clone myself. I get to do all the, but like
forever,
Yeah, but Palpatine got more of that kind of long-term vision thinking, while it's like Markion's like, oh shoot, I don't know what to do, and now I'm getting visions of my ancestors and my dad, and like I don't know what to do, and he's kind of a little lost. All he knows, he just wants the Jedi to he wants the Jedi dead. He hates the Jedi. Darn the Jedi. Markion would make great Sith Lord because he hates the Jedi just as much as the Sith do. But yeah, that's sort of his thing. It's like he's so impulsive. He kind of doesn't have like a grand scheme. He's sometimes good at thinking on his feet. I'll give him that. Like Dominic said, he kind of 2 steps ahead. But I do wonder if it's like, if that's kind of like he's limited, like how far he can always be 2 steps ahead before it's like, oh shoot, I'm not that far ahead anymore. Like it's not like the kind of Palpatine Thrawn brilliance of like really being good at improvising and grand thinking. Like I was really good at this when I was in a certain place, but I have a very much of a ceiling, and now I'm stuck here. Like, oh dang, and now I'm starting to lose. Now I'm starting to lose it because like I don't really know what to do. I didn't expect to get this far. So that's what I meant by the dog got the car.
That's fair. I mean, it's interesting that cycle of angst and just aggression and very unpredictable and volatile. Like Yura is trying to. Well, Yura has this buyer's remorse about this, and she's had it for a while, but she's trying to be the one to clamp down, so she saves her skin, but also maybe be able to pull the triggers and pull the levers. Dom, what do you think? Especially you're going to mention Gira visiting Coruscant and everything with Markion and Gira and everything with the Nile. What stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Gira clearly doesn't know what she's done, or she didn't know what she was doing when she got involved in the Nile. I think she saw it as a way to, you know, grow her position, grow her power in the galaxy. Yeah. And you know, she seemed to think she could bring Marchion Ro along in this way of like legitimizing the I know they said the First Order, the Nile government, and the Nile as a government, and she obviously is completely mistaken, and he, you know, is allowing her now to, you know, kind of dig her own grave and fail. He sends her to Coruscant with the expectation that she's going to fail, because he knows that after everything that he's done, the Republic and the Jedi are never going to accept any sort of official Nile representation in their government. That's a non-starter for them. It's never going to happen. So, you know, he sends her, you know, knowing that she's going to fail. The thing is, though, she's kind of right about, you know, what the next steps should be for the Nile, because Joel, I think you've absolutely nailed it with the analogy of Marchion being the dog that caught the car. Because what does he do now? He's set up the storm wall. He's brought down Starlight. He's attacked the fair. Like, he has everybody living in fear. He doesn't have any more cards to play. His cards to play are just more fear. And the thing about that is, at a certain point, people are, you know, fear only lasts a certain amount of time. People are either going to realize, I'm not actually that scared of you, or you're going to push them to a point where they go, F you, no more, I'm pushing back. And I wonder if, you know, the way he broadcast the murder of Jedi Master Vitamin de Vegemin, if
Crotray better.
Yeah, sure. If you know that murder live on television, essentially might have been, you know, kind of a point where people start to go, oh God, like somebody's got to do something about these guys. We can't just, you know, go, let's, you know, keep ourselves safe. It's now, we might need to fight back. So I think Marchion's kind of in this place where, like, what does he want? He wants to bring down the Jedi. That's all he's got left. But he's put himself by making himself such a prominent figure and such a prominent threat in the galaxy. He's just drawn a big old target on his face.
Literally.
And now and now the Jedi are coming for him. The Republic is coming for him. Like, they know who he is. They know who he is to bring down, and they're actively figuring out ways to stop him. You know, his sort of reign of terror can only go so far if he doesn't have an actual end goal in mind other than destruction. You have to, if you're going to tear something down, you have to have an idea for what you're going to build back in its place. And that's what, you know, Palpatine, you know, for as evil as he was, he had an idea for what was going to replace the Republic. He was building an empire. He wanted to be emperor of the galaxy
and God.
I don't think Marchion wants that. He has a more personal vendetta, but he's gone about it in such a way that's so public, is forward facing, that you know, now he's brought the Republic to its knees, but that's not enough. That's not enough for him. So he's the dog who's got the car. Yeah,
I'd like to ask you, Dominic, as well. Do you think Marchion, on the difference between also Marchion and say Palpatine, is Marchion has, maybe, even though he probably will never admit it to anybody, way more self-doubt about himself compared to Palpatine, who I always think is like, no, he is overconfidence, your weakness. Palpatine, kind of rightfully for a good chunk of his life, Palpatine knows he's top dog because he can just zap, you know, like, he got the political power, he's also got the force powers. There's not like you just come at Palpatine with a spear and kill him. It's like he can zap you, and he can do probably some things with the force that are just like, oh my gosh. While Marchion is like, you know, Marchion kind of maybe in the deepest depths of his angry mind knows, I'm still at the end of the day just a dude, and these Jedi are more powerful than me.
It's just some guy. It's an interesting thought. I still don't really feel like I understand the Marchion Ro character. I thought, you know, when I saw this cover and I saw this title, like, we're gonna finally start to understand this guy. And I was kind of surprised at how little he's actually in the book. And when he is, we're almost always seeing him through Gira's eyes. I think there's only one or two like POV chapters for him. Right. And so I still don't really feel like I understand him. He's still this sort of nebulous threat that's out there. And I think for and it's probably because the way to defeat this character is they're going to have to understand him. They're going to have to understand what makes him tick, and so we're going to have to see that through the eyes of characters that are through the heroes, the characters that are in opposition to him. And so to tell the audience that in his sort of inner monologues, a couple of books ahead doesn't really serve the story. Because right now he still just seems like just some, crazy guy who's like super good at planning and has all these advantages and figured it out. And what he wants is still kind of nebulous. What his goals are still kind of nebulous. But it's more clear what he doesn't want, and that is, I don't think he wants to be emperor. He has some kind of personal vendetta that he's fulfilling, which, for all the Palpatine's, machinations and all of his evilness, he didn't really have a personal vendetta against anybody. It was more a personal vendetta just against the concept of goodness.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
Jedi.
here's the question: I thought at the end of Fallen Star and the end of phase 1 rather, I thought he was still a very compelling, gripping villain. I thought that
he is a great villain. Like, I don't feel I have to understand a villain for them to be a great villain. Like, he still feels like a threat. It still feels like he's going to do, he can still do anything, create havoc in the galaxy, still create problems for our heroes. But we don't know why he's doing it.
Joel, I just want to jump in because I haven't spoken in a bit, but
okay.
I mean, to me, it's getting at the classic High Republic problem of not a problem. It's not a problem. I don't think it's a problem. I like it. I love it. But some people might find it a problem, especially if you haven't read phase 2. I'm reading into this with all of Markian's motivations, especially the way what he does to Master Protre Vetter.
Vitamin to Benjamin.
Vitamin to Benjamin. I'm hearing Grandma's tragedy with Kevmo. I'm hearing the path of the open hand becoming the path of the closed fist, because they've been told the Force must be free and the Jedi are abusing the Force. And that they forget the original reason for that, but they hold on to the anxiety and the worry that becomes a fear and a hatred left unchecked and empowered by the way the Nihil can then go out and maraud and whatever the verb is. But I'm hearing that. I'm hearing the Herald and Grand Aunt on Jeddah going before the convocation and being completely turned down as well, similar to the way Gira is turned down for the same reasons, right? For similar reasons, I should say. Here's a faction that does not respect the legitimacy of the table. Can I have a seat at the table? No, you cannot. So I'm going to go out and cause a battle and spark a battle. And the kind of what ends up happening there. Interesting parallels. I'm hearing that as part of Markian's motivations, and again, it's the classic storytelling thing. Is that good storytelling across a multimedia publishing initiative? Is it good storytelling in a novel? I guess, Dom, what you're saying is, even if you haven't read phase 2, that's still, it still holds up the promise that we'll get more later on.
And like, even if you have read phase 2, like, you can read that stuff into it, but that's
it's me reading into it.
Well, you're reading into it, right? And it's still sort of nebulous. And there's a great gap in that. Sure. There's this great gap between what the Path of the Open Hand was doing and the Path of Closed Fist and what the Nihil are doing. There's there's 150 years in between that. Stuff has happened and stuff has changed, and what their goals are. It's definitely related to what happened in phase 2. Otherwise, that's not part of the story.
Right.
But it's not going to be the same thing. And Markian feels. What was so interesting about Martero in phase 2 was that she was a true believer in this.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I know what Marchion Ro believes in yet. And that's not a criticism. That's something I'm interested in future stories. And so that's where I'm coming from. Is like there's this big gap missing in the history of the Nile, and to understand what's going to happen is because we've seen point A and point S, is to understand points B through T in there.
Yeah.
I'll add
one last thing, Joel, I want to say is, I hope my guy Reith, historian, is able to uncover that then, because, and I do hope part of it, frankly, is the origins with Marda, but then what it is happening in between. That's a good point. Joel, go ahead.
Well, my biggest criticism, it's what I've heard a lot, is like Nile still kind of don't make any sense as a faction, really, and it's kind of really hard to understand why, outside of guess crazy people, why we would join it. And it's sort of like it's okay to have like pure evil factions like the Empire, but you understand why people join the Empire. Fascism is a real thing in the real world. Order, discipline, power. The Separatists. As much as I critique how we portrayed the Separatists in a lot of Clone Wars, there is that idea of like, the Republic was becoming a very core-centric government. Hey, what about our Rim folk? Obviously, they get all co-opted by Count Dooku, Grievous, and all the evil mega banks. But, it's like, I understand why you join the Separatists. With the Nile, it's like every time we see a Nile soldier, it's like, oh, it's just some angsty teenager who wants to kill their parents. Or
and that feels like that's what's built into, that's the inherent flaw in the Nile. And it's why I think the Nile are less a faction as more a tool for Marchion Ro to accomplish whatever he wants to accomplish. And we still don't understand what that is because we haven't seen the steps. And again, hopefully, Reith or any of these other characters can sort out what that is. Because the Nile, they just they seem to be like almost anarchists. Like they're out just to create chaos. They're not interested in really anything else. They're all just sort of out for themselves, in a sort of violent way. And Marchion is his great skill as the leader of this is getting all of them to point that rage and that anger and that whatever it is in the same direction. Where that leads, who's to say? But it also feels like that's also built into what's going to be his downfall. Is there's going to come a point when he's going to need true believers, and I don't think there's many true believers in the Nile.
That's kind of what I want to find out. Because like I love the path of the open hand, because like I get where they're coming from. It's like, okay, they don't like people using the Force. They think that is not something human, mortal beings should be doing. I get that. That makes total sense. And then it's kind of go to like the Nile, which is like, let's just kill people because we want to, like, chaos, and like that is like, like I don't get what your grievances with the Republic are. You just are kind of crazy people. I mean, like, you have no grievances really.
It does tap into the way we want permission to be selfish. We want permission to just fill ourselves up with whatever we want. In our society, we have things like New Year's Eve, where we can take a night to be a little less responsible. Maybe.
The purge.
It is. This is the purge. This is the Nile, the purge world.
But for them, with the Nile, it's just go nuts, right? So I do understand a little bit. A lot of them are just are captured and forced into this system. Like Bellin, like with Melgar, whatever his name is, Meglar, and they just, it's hard to get out, and they're psychologically abused and tortured and into this system where you fit into the system of chaos or you die, and so the survival instinct kicks in. Again, I'm kind of interpreting all of that, but I think it's there a little bit. I will say Count Dooku was a visionary. There we go. You guys have any last thoughts on the Nile at this point before we get into it? All right.
I'm curious how deep into phase 3 the Nile and Marchion are going to go for. I wonder if they're going to be the villains to the very end.
The final book comes out spring 2025. That's my guess for how deep they.
Okay, I mean, they're the villains. This is the war against the Nile.
At the very least, I think Marchion is the Nile may abandon him, but but him and those nameless, I feel like they're
Yeah.
they're the end game here. It doesn't seem to be, doesn't feel like something else is being set up, and honestly, if something else came, it'd have to be very well established
It's
in
not
the
the
next
Drengir.
in the next oh god it'd have to be very well established in the next like round of books for it to feel like it pays off, because we've had a phase and a bit of denial already, and that they've done so much damage, it wouldn't, I don't think it would feel right if all of a sudden, no, actually they're just a red herring for the real villain who was off screen the whole time.
I mean, the real villain, you could say, the real challenge for the Jedi are the Nameless and the Leveler, right? And it, in a way, and so we had a whole phase devoted to them, phase 2, effectively. They're the ones that are still around. So
right. I just want to say one more thing, and then we'll move on. Is I'm gonna be very curious how, when the High Republic stuff is over, or even by phase 3, what the legacy of the Nile is in terms of the wider history of Star Wars. We got a little bit in the comics where it's like, oh, there's some Nile stuff, but it's like, it's kind of like, I wonder if they're gonna play it like, were the Nile really this big thing, or it's like, in the grand scheme, now this weird little blip that happened one year, and then compare that to the Empire, to Palpatine, to Dooku, where it's like we left massive scars that are probably not going to heal for generations. I wonder if the Nile is kind of be at the grand, like Martheon Row, you're a bad guy now, but it's like, no one's going to remember you in 100 years. No one's going to remember Martheon Row. They'll remember Palpatine. They'll remember Thrawn and the Empire, but the Sith, but you, Martheon, you're going to be a nothing.
Well, let's get into a clue to a possible answer to what might make him quite memorable. Then I'll finally change this thing here. The galactic pivot, the major hinge point in this novel, and both brilliantly written, brilliantly built up to, and deeply important in the overall history and overall story. So Elzar, Kevin, and Lena, so you've alluded to this, they think they have a way through the storm wall. They think, Kevin, I forget his last name, but who was the one who linked all the droids on Hetzel at the beginning. He's on Coruscant. He's running the numbers. Thinks he's figured it away, get through the storm wall. There's such a dramatic build up, the way that is written. And I had to cover with my thumb, like the next line, to see what happened, to prevent seeing what happens, to spoil myself. And and it explodes. Met with massive epic failure, just these ships crashing into the storm wall. Bell and Burry, they're part of this offensive. They barely escape. And the dramatic buildup is heightened by their failure there. They don't just look like clowns. They look completely out to lunch and completely useless. Then the big moment, I think, so Gira, she's rebuffed. That just gives Marky an excuse for more propaganda. But really, this attack on the storm wall, I think, is Markin's cue to say, okay, flick a switch. I'm going to move the storm wall. And it can go, basically, it seems like it can go wherever he wants and expand the occlusion zone as far as he wants. That's at least suggested. At least that's the threat that he poses. It's never confirmed whether or not he can do that. But that is the real game changer, the big game changer, that suggests the Nile and Marking way more formidable of a threat than we expected. That who knows what kind of worlds he can encompass. You remember, the storm wall, you can't pass through hyperspace through it. That's the key. It takes weeks, if not years. It would take years to pass through sublight, and so it's an effective barrier that keeps the RDC and the Jedi out, that allows Nihil storms and tempests to go and maraud, as there's the word I use, and levy tithes and oppress planets, and seemingly at will can move this at will. Again, technology is probably more complicated than that, but that's this major, again, dramatic moment that has these wide implications. Dom, I remember you read one of these plot points. I forget which one. And you were sitting there, you read it, you closed the book, and you had to stand up. What was
Yeah.
all that about?
Yeah, it was when they're trying to get through the storm wall. Because like I think in hindsight should know that that's not going to work. It's just too early in the story for that to work. But you've been reading Elzar's chapters and Lena So's chapters too, but especially Elzar's chapters for so long. You see how badly he needs this, how badly he wants this, and I was sort of thinking like, oh, they'll get one ship through and it'll be trapped on the other side, but the thing will close. But then to just have it just like, here's his effort to make things right after what he views as his consistent failures, and what happens? He just winds up with more death. More people are killed, and more deaths that he can blame himself for. And that I found that really sort of powerful and moving and impactful in the story. And then a chapter later, it's like, and the storm wall began to move, and you're like, oh my god, it's just it's just another thing that he's gonna wear, that he's gonna see as his failure, as something that he's done wrong. And it was so effectively written and so like beautifully written and so sort of powerful and emotional that I need to take a quick moment after reading that section before I could continue, because I desperately wanted to continue, but it just sort of like, wow, what a moment. Let's appreciate this moment before we figure out what happens next.
Yeah, it was a great reaction, and it's the kind of reaction George Mann probably was hoping for.
Oh yeah.
And so Chris Abbott, for him it was moving the storm wall, and the shock of that, and to say, oh yeah, this can actually happen. Joel, what was your reaction to the I linked the two only because in part the great defeat, it's the great defeat and the great victory of Markian, they're together, just showing how not invincible, how strong he is, formidable he is. Joel, was your reaction to those two moments?
Yeah, this is. I guess I can have a weird reaction because, like, this is where the High Republic for me starting to get close to crossing a bit of a line here for me personally. I'm not big into caring about certain lines of dialogue in Star Wars. I'm one of the few people who doesn't care that Yoda thinks Luke's the last Jedi or whatever. Yeah, we've crossed that bridge. Too late, you can't go back. But this is kind of for me getting to a point where it's like, is this High Republic event getting a little too big? Is this crossing that line of galactic full scale war since the formation of the Republic for 1,000 years of peace? Because the Clone Wars is the big thing. It's the thing that really it is the world war of Star Wars in a way. This is more like, I don't know, if you want. I thought the now thing would be like I don't know, Korea or Vietnam, where it's like, yeah, it's happening. It's not good if you live in Vietnam or Korea. I'm not taking away from that, but it's like, still not a nuclear world war where two major superpowers can destroy each other with nukes. It's police action. That's what they call the Korea War. A police action. Love history. So it's all like, Mario Rose got a lot of territory. I mean, he's got Ariadu. What's going on there? That's Tarkin's world. But they were better than that. They were fighters. Where the Tarkins come from. And for me, it's like, I'm gonna have to see how this goes. It's like we're kind of touching that point where it's like, this seems like a pretty big deal for the pre-Clone Wars prequel galaxy, and kind of at the end of the day, I mean, obviously, I'm sure we'll see the repercussions as time moves on, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. This is kind of getting close to the line. It's not crossing it, but it's getting there. It's like it's right on the edge.
Right. And I'll say, for some reason, the story group allowed it to go through, and that they had to. Like, I think phase 3 lives or dies, based on whether or not Markian can be this formidable. Yeah, I mean, I trust them to be aware of the shadow of the Clone Wars, the specter of it. I don't know, Dom, what do you think of that? Possibly?
Well, yeah, it's like the Clone Wars is like there's war everywhere. It's like you can't escape the fighting. This is sort of a different kind of thing. It's less of a war, more of like some kind of occupation.
Police action.
Yeah. It's so it feels there's Star Wars always kind of plays fast and loose with these sort of declarative statements it makes about its past, and this feels like it's within my personal sort of window of like, yeah, sure, it's not a war, so I'm good with that. There's enough gray space there that I can make do.
Yeah, I mean, it does make for just within the High Republic story. It really ups the ante and makes for even more compelling. I mean, the way it is the thing that this novel sets up at the beginning of Phase 3. That this is what the Jedi and the Republic have to deal with. This is who they have to deal with, and yeah, so it gets into what you were saying before about who is this person they have to deal with. We know what he can do, but why? And maybe even it makes the Stormwall. I said the nameless are the real threat. The Stormwall is also this real threat, and there's the potential for it. Again, we'll get the end with Avar being able to navigate through it. That's also going to have implications, but kind of getting ahead of myself. But that's okay. Really, yeah. I was incredibly satisfied with this moment. I was incredibly like, and maybe I wasn't thinking in terms of okay, the Clone Wars can't be as big as the Clone Wars, but yeah, I thought it was it makes High Republic at least. I mean, it was already, but it reminds us that this is a significant time period. That there's a reason. There's a reason for telling this story. There's a reason for the Team Luminous to tell this story. It does. It was already significant. It kind of shows us what the significance is. And again, we've had an episode a few months ago about them. It's a fictional thing. They're deciding that this is significant, so because they're telling this fictional story. But it really, it was always going to earn it for me. This moment really does earn it for me, or earn why they're telling this story, why they're telling it now. Joel, you mentioned off the top, and we're going to get to this at the end. But you mentioned off the top the relationship to the late Republic. Yeah, and you mentioned it here with the question of the Clone Wars. We're going to pick this up in full at the end, but it really gives us the sense of, what Markian Rowe is doing will matter whether or not he's remembered or not. I do think about how the Nile relate to the Separatists, for example. I do think about how the Nile relate to the Rebel Alliance, and even the Cloud Riders as a smaller example. But
I don't get that, but
well, that's just a fun fan theory. But in terms of these armed resistance to a government on Coruscant, for example, and in the Outer Rim, and what's the word? Not revenge. Resentment against the Jedi and against the Republic. So that was a moment. I don't know, Joel, you have any further thoughts, especially about I mean the Stormwall. I'm harping on that because I found it so significant. But you have any further thoughts on this?
I wonder how far. And again, this is where it can't be bigger than the Clone Wars thing. He kind of needs to kind of thing. So like I don't want the Nile's territory to get super big like the Separatists. Like the Separatists, like 1,000 world splits, like cut the Republic in half. It's like keep the Nile's territory at least somewhat small. Scale they got Ariadu, but
it's already a fairly significant chunk.
I mean that's my problem.
Adventures.
that's
yeah. I mean High Republic Adventures. It's not half. It's kind of the southeast curve of the Outer Rim. There's this map, and then I'm looking at the map from the timelines poster. I'm like trying to trace it out, and then Dom, you're keeping that spoiler in. Oh, the Stormwall moves, and this yeah. So yeah, it's something, Joel. I'll say it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Keep an eye on. Say what they do. It's something again they've had to keep an eye on. The Team Luminous and pun intended, if not really, but the Team Luminous is aware of that. Just like, for example, it's like how Sabe and Ahsoka can impact, especially Ahsoka can impact Vader, but Luke is the one who has to impact Vader, right? It's a similar kind of thing. I think there's steps along the way
Or,
on a larger scale. So
how, Thrawn could come back and do some big stuff in the Mandoverse, but he still got to lose because we got a First Order coming in 30 years.
So
So, yeah.
compelling story moment. Dom, you have any further thoughts on these two moments together? Oh, muted. Push the red button.
Just that they were great because they were like really, really, just really well executed in the book, and I found them really, really impactful. So, yeah. Great stuff.
George Mann, that is how you do it. If you want nerdy historical sci-fi thing happening, but really character focused, character driven, young authors take note. Up and coming. I don't know. Not that I am necessarily, but you know what I mean. It's how you do it. It's how you do it. All righty, let's get to this thrilling conclusion. And there's a comment up here. The entire first half of all these characters, there is, yes, Elzar and Bell and them, their failure with the storm wall, and then the other. Yes, it's true that the conclusion focuses on a handful of characters. I didn't mind that. I thought it was still pretty thrilling. I think with Elzar and Markian, that story kind of ends, and then you have Porter and Avar and Bellin and Rill. Their story has to pick up, and what happens there. So it's almost to say that there are two climaxes and two conclusions in this, and they're weaved really well. I mean, kind of like The Last Jedi, has Rey's story, Rey and Kylo's story, on in the throne room, and then you have Poe and Finn and Rose's story on Crate. Yeah, it's similar kind of thing. There's two kind of conclusions that have to come together, and they do end up coming together in the very end. Porter, Avar, and Bellin, they get Rill's message. They rendezvous with her and Quith on Hetzel. Like you said, Porter, like Dom, you said, Porter has this great Thor moment later on.
Oh yeah.
They escape on and they I'm skipping a bit of details getting to this. So they escape and they take over Shrike's ship. They have to blast through it. It's a bit complicated. This does build to a final confrontation, as General Weiss is coming to clean up what Shrike the mess Shrike has made. General Weiss comes and it leads to this final confrontation between Porter Engle and General Weiss, whatever, and that lets Avar escape through the storm wall using these Pathfinder codes, and building on what Porter had built, his genius coming through. Avar is able to, like you're saying, say, I can't do this alone, but I can go back to the team and be part of the team and find help. And hopefully we'll see that more in a later story. Rill and Bellin decide to stay in the Occlusion Zone, and they're really converted, if I can use that term. They really have this great development where it isn't just about them escaping. They can actually, everything Rill is also experienced on Valo and now in the Occlusion Zone on Hetzel. She stays, Bellin stays. The Help World's oppressed by the Dial. I thought Porter's fate was kind of unknown. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like he was kind of left murky in part. I think there is this announced Charles Soule comic coming up, unless I've completely forgotten. He ends up dying too. I forget. Someone can confirm that for me, but that's my recollection of it. It's just kind of, he's able to kill General Weiss, but kind of vague there. Avar, and this is another comment I'll highlight from Double Media. Avar makes it back through back to Coruscant with her vital method to get through the storm wall, and she has that Jedi romance moment with Elzar in the council chamber, and that would be nice. They kind of brush hands, and he should hold her hand, but like him. Yes, that'd be a fun little parallel there. I don't think that's going to happen, but what I do see with, and I'll get to this point with Avar and Elzar, it is a perfect ending because again, they're parallel paths, and the distance between them, they feel that so strongly, but it meant that they have to actually find themselves on their own, and that can then lead to a more mutual partnership. Now, Avar, Elzar, he put Avar on a pedestal like everyone else, but also different. There's kind of this weird sort of idealizing crush thing, even though they are close. Um, Avar may have put Elzar on a bit of a pedestal. Is rash, irresponsible, free spirit who I wish I could be like. They've kind of converged in the middle. It does, again, it does raise this fun fanfic question. How far will they push the Jedi code? Will they leave? Like, the Aayla Secura Kit Fisto thing in Legends, they won't go that far. This is a nice idea. I don't think they're going to go that far, but I hope they'll be able to harness it into a productive and supportive partnership. But it is good drama. It is, it'll be a good question with that relationship going forward. So yeah, that's the conclusion of all those things that happened. What, Joel, I'll throw this to you. What stood out to you in this ending?
Yeah, probably all the Avar Eldar stuff. Just kind of like it's like I get it now. I get why why they're the thing. It was very just like all Avar's back and all that good stuff. It's like she can hear the song again. So that's what I got out of that. And I don't know, just very like kind of like a weird optimism, about all the chaos. Like, oh, thank heavens we're home.
Yeah, but even the stuff before that final confrontation, their escape, etc. What did you think of all that?
Oh no, that was all cool. It was very action packed. And like, remember when Avar just gets the communication? She sounds so happy. Bethany in the audio drama, it's like, oh, she sounds so happy to hear them right now. It's like,
yeah,
oh, I'm so happy right now. It's like you just feel the emotions.
They can hear Bell and Burry, and know that Burry's alive. There's the pin down. No, yeah, that's a great moment. Yeah, and just hearing, okay, that Song of the Force, it was discordant, but that was her learning to again be part of the team and to say, I'm not here to fix this, I'm here to contribute to this wider mission. That character growth at the end. Dom, what'd you think of the ending to this novel overall?
It was thrilling. It was exciting. It paid off. It paid off the journey that we'd been on. Like, I reminded me kind of The Empire Strikes Back in that way, where
high praise.
Well, so it's a story where everything goes wrong for the heroes, and it's only at the very end that something slightly goes right for them. And admittedly, it's kind of a bigger deal, I think, in this book than in Empire. But like in Empire, everything has gone wrong, and so at the end of the movie, they're about to get captured again by the Empire, and suddenly, finally, R2-D2 fixes the hyperdrive, and bam, we're out of there. Yeah, and it's just this sort of feeling of relief of like, okay, we got out of it. We've been through hell. We've had all these terrible things happen to our characters. We've lost one of our characters in essence, with Han Solo being trapped in carbonite, but we've got out of it. So we've lived to fight another day, and that's what this book felt like, because everything's gone wrong in this book. No characters had a good time in this book, but at the end, they figured out a way. They got through the storm wall. They've got a path drive. There is hope. There's a way forward. They've lived to fight another day. And we get that. We get some of those reunions that we've been waiting for. So it pays off nicely. It's that sort of like, we spent an entire book just being punched in the face with horrible stuff. And we finally landed a little slap back.
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, just hearing you talk about that reminds me of what Rian Johnson says about The Last Jedi, right? Push these characters into the most difficult situation, because that's where growth happens. That's where, where the change in their personalities, which we didn't get much of. Like we were saying, we haven't gotten much growth for Avar and Elzar in phase 1. We've gotten a lot more for the younger characters, the Padawans and the young Jedi, the young Knights. Yeah, we really get a lot more in this one. This is, yeah, they're really and I mean, it's the first one. I mean, you can sort of say Light of the Jedi, Avar is a main character. This one's very clear. Avar and Elzar are the main characters in this, and yeah, because they've gone through such a ringer, they come through. Yeah, it's a path drive. Using the Nile technology against them. Then, there's that. Yeah. I'm trying to think of more to say there. I don't know, Joel, do you have any further thoughts?
No, but the Empire reference is the good one.
Yeah,
for sure. That's certainly a really good analogy. But yeah, that's all I got for that.
Yeah. I mean, the ending actually is kind of straightforward, oddly enough, for this book. It seems right. There's the battle on the ship, and then they're able to get into the other ship and get away. I mean, after everything, again, all the different plot lines in the first part of the book, yeah, it is this great contrast of this relief, right? That everything's going forward. I mean, again, the Stormwall can still move. We still don't know. Market. I mean, still got the Nameless and the Leveler out there. We don't know how formidable what this threat is, but yeah, there's this glimmer of hope that does seem to be. I mean, that's the thing is I think to be good payoff to say that having this path drive, it actually is the key to getting through the storm wall and to circumventing or countermeasure against the storm wall. Oddly enough, Avar has a part in fixing the problem, even as she's able to then join a team to fix the problem. So tapping into what she's driven by still is it all comes together there. Of course, Porter's impact. I do think I think at the end of this is a bit of an aside. At the end of The Blade, there's an ad for a Phase 3 comic by Charles Soule, The Broken Blade. I wonder if is that still happening? Because I wondered, if Porter doesn't survive this book, is that comic cancel? I don't know, because I do want to see more of Porter. I still really want to see.
I suspect that even if there isn't a twist coming, that there's still. I think those books are going to happen. I think that they just may be set earlier.
That's possible.
And much in the same way that the Blade teed up some stuff that comes into play later.
Yeah,
it could still tee up things down the line, or it could just be a kick-ass Porter Engel story. Which
we'll take that. That's fine. I do think it is. I mean, it wasn't clear which phase it's meant to be part of. That's a possibility. And Dom, you have any further thoughts on the conclusion?
No, like I said, it's just I think it pays off. What it pays off the story so nicely. It's an emotional high. It's emotional. It concludes the emotional journey in a really satisfying way.
All right, and Joel, maybe any last thoughts on the conclusion before we move on?
Nope.
All right. So we can get to some of the big takeaways. Looking at the book as a whole, I have a bunch of these. I don't know if we can get to all of them, but we'll try. I mean, I mentioned Porter. What do we think of the way it builds on this novel? Builds on Phase 2. It's the first major story, first novel, full-length novel we get after Phase 2. After reading Phase 2, we get more of Porter's story. We've touched on this with Porter. We've touched on the Pathfinders and that technology. I mean, I'm hearing resonances at least in Markian with Marta's journey, with the Path of the Open Hand, even not just Phase 2, but I mean the Marta story in Tales of Light and Life is effectively Phase 2. Joel, how do you think of how this story built on Phase 2?
I'm gonna be honest. I felt it built more on Phase 1 than it built on Phase 2.
Interesting. Yeah, fair. Yeah. But I'm specifically though, like we'll get to that for sure. The specific points about phase 2, because we are gonna, yeah.
I didn't get much of that phase 2,
right.
honestly, from this
Okay.
book. I didn't even remember Porter was in phase 2.
Yeah.
As for the Marta stuff, I didn't read that. I thought just marking on row with just he had power. Now he's gonna go crazy with it
Sure.
because he's just kind of a volatile, unstable person.
Yeah. All
So that was my big takeaway, I guess.
right. Dom, any thoughts on phase 2, and then go into phase 1?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this one. I don't think this one built on phases 2 in huge ways. It more teases that.
Okay.
It teases
way of
what's to
putting it.
come. Because yeah, you have Aslan show up briefly. There is a mention of Marta. It sort of promises that, you know, all that time that you spent reading those books, that is going to factor into what we're doing here. There is a purpose to it. But that's not what this book is about. This
Sure.
book is about getting us back into the phase 1 and phase 3 storyline.
Yeah.
And the Porter thing, I mean, I remembered that Porter was in phase 2, but I did not. It didn't click for me who the general was. That wasn't. I like the blade, but it didn't wow me. It's not one that stuck with me, and so it was sort of like, oh, okay, oh, she has history with him. Okay, was that a character in the thing? I had to go back and look at the blade and at the Wikipedia pages and that sort of thing to try and like figure it out. Of like, oh, okay, so that is that character. And so, you know, knowing that and having read the blade, I think it heightened it a little bit, but it wasn't this sort of big meaningful phase 2 connections that I'm waiting for and that I believe are coming down the line, that and again that are teased in this book.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The things are going to come after. Again, I did find it heightened the drama with General Vice, but to each their own. Then I guess similar question then, you know, how do we feel it built on phase 1? I mean, that's a bit more of the straightforward one in terms of getting us back into the story, like you said. I mean, yeah, I guess things we've said before, said already about how Markian, he's there, he's accomplished all this stuff, and it's then what now? Yeah. Dom, how do you think it built on phase 1?
I mean,
do you think it built on phase 1?
I think it built on phase 1 really well. I mean, it picks up. It's obviously it's a continuation of that story, and I think it sort of drops you back in the action in a place where, you know, time has passed, but and you feel that time has passed, but you don't feel like you're missing anything in a huge way. And I think it improved on phase 1 again in its depictions of Elzar and Avar, which I always felt like I was constantly being told in phase 1 that they, along with Stellan, are so great. And I never really felt like I understood them or knew them as a character in that same way. They never quite lived up to the hype. And in this book, honestly, seeing them torn down a peg suddenly made me really empathize with them and appreciate them as characters. So yeah, built on phase 1 in big important ways.
I mean, again, it's interesting, you know, all the talk about Avar, Elzar, Stellan in universe in the story it's largely from the perspective of the young knights and Padawans who look up to them, maybe who they themselves don't know them as well. I mean, Vern would know Stellan because, you know, Vern was, you know, they were, you know, I don't think Vern was his Padawan. I'm fairly sure. So there is that relationship, that connection, but yeah, by and large, it is true. It is seeing them for the first time, in a way, and then being, you know, like I said, being the main characters for the first time. One character we just mentioned is Stellan, you know, and this is more so to the beginning, more so Shadows of Starlight, more so the Tales of Light and Life story. How much do we feel Stellan's influence on this story? How much do we feel especially with Elzar, but also with Avar? Joel, did you pick up on any of that?
I mean, I definitely picked on the Avar Elzar's romance stuff for sure. Picked up on that a lot. Stellan, I didn't get much of a sense reading this book from. I don't kind of remember if he was mentioned. I mean, I'm sure he probably was. I just don't remember. There's a lot that happened in this book, so I don't remember much. But you know, I do think in terms of like how this book builds on phase one, as someone who didn't read a lot of phase one that much, I wasn't lost at all. I was like, okay, I know what's going on. I was able to follow what the book was putting down, as I think I said before, more or less clearly. I didn't feel completely lost or confused by anybody. So that was a good sign. It's like, okay, it's like stuff happened, and now this is the situation we're in now. So yeah, and I agree. I do wonder if phase one maybe suffered a bit too much from telling and not showing, and now we're finally showing
Interesting.
Avar and Elzar kind of being the characters we were told they were like, but now we get to actually see it.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dom, too good. The audio microphone. Yeah, Dom, do you? I mean, especially because behind the question is what I was saying about Elzar and the tension to kind of grow into Stellan's example. Avar, both Avar and Elzar, yeah, they're missing each other and they're missing Stellan. Is there a sense both? Do we think maybe there's a sense both that Elzar or Stellan was the glue, the core between them that was able to show this responsibility? I also wonder, just a thought, putting it out there, was Stellan's presence holding them back from Avar finding out she doesn't have to be the hero of Hetzel, or Stellan wouldn't tell her she has to be, but still, depending on that mutual reinforcement. Elzar, sorry, Stellan's presence holding Elzar back. I don't have to be responsible. Stellan can be the responsible one. Now that he's gone, I have to sort of take up that mantle that droid is helping. I don't know, Dom, would you say that came across, or was that kind of lost?
It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. I was thinking like, I feel like I felt Stellan's presence more in this book than some of the books where he was alive in, to be perfectly honest. Like he felt like more of a real sort of character in the way he existed in these characters' memories. But that's an interesting idea, that maybe, this idea that he could have been holding them back in some way. But I think all three of them, they come from from a place of acting as a unit, and then we never really see them as a unit. We always see them separated, and it's almost like they don't know how to be separated from each other. And this book was the first time where they had to grapple with the fact that they couldn't just fall back on the other ones. Like, it's even that the opportunity to be that perfect unit doesn't exist anymore, because Stellan's dead and Avar's trapped on the other side of the storm wall. So it's sort of like there is no way for that perfect trio to exist. So how do they operate? And I think that was I think that was an interesting sort of approach to the book and approach to those relationships.
Joel, do you have any further thoughts on the trio becoming a duo?
No, but maybe I just didn't read enough of phase one to really get a sense that they really were a trio in the first place. Maybe I don't know. It's just one of those things, like maybe that was more in the comics, but like I outside of getting Avar and Elzar clearly being a thing, I never got the sense there was ever a trio, quite frankly. So maybe that just hadn't read enough phase one, but that's just the vibe I got just from the book.
That's a problem with phase one, I think, is that they should have had some time with them all together and to understand them, because I came away from phase one not understanding the hype behind any of those characters. There's a lot of great characters in phase one, but I never got the hype behind those three. And one of the great things about this book is that all of a sudden I got it. I got it. And it's because I think we actually got to spend time with them in ways that the other books, yes and no. And no. We spent time with them, but it always felt like they were doing other things.
Yeah. It would have phase one, it would have benefited from a flashback to decades before. And more of that, like we got, say, with Cantum Psi, for example. Talking about, their time as a Padawan. Is it Cantum or is Comic? One of the, I think it's Cantum. The time as a Padawan, leaving out, finding themselves, and then coming back and encountering Lula and taking on the responsibility of taking on a Padawan. That kind of thing, like sort of we see in the Blade, for example, with Porter and Barash, We get that time to get the impact between the two of them. Yeah, I get the criticism. Interestingly enough, my mind goes to what were they before? Where does all this come from? And decades before. I mean, that's what's so. I think there's that's why I think Comac, because there's also the flashback with Comac and I think it's Orla Jareni. They're decades before, they're on Irem or Arano, and the the monarchs there, and then part of the peace building there. We get to see a sense of how they were when. Again, I'm going to keep repeating this. At the age that the High Republic, story wise, character wise, is the best at is the younger knights and the Padawans. That I find the character growth there. Let's connect them that storytelling impetus to these older characters a little more. Again, Eye of Darkness shows that we don't have to do that, but yeah, it gives it backstory becoming main story. I think it maybe hopefully we'll get that maybe in
Too
in
much
future
story,
shows.
in my opinion. Sometimes.
Well, it's a whole publishing initiative. Yeah, I mean, but that's to the point. I mean, the reason we didn't get that is because of so much of the focus is on, and this is an excuse. This could be a bad excuse. So much of the focus is on these younger knights and Padawans that they didn't have time or didn't take the time to give us Avar Alzar and Stellan's backstory, or not backstory, but fill out their characters by showing where they come from. I get that criticism. Again, maybe it goes back to the very beginning of this episode where I say I didn't mind it because I love the story so much, and these young stories that it didn't bug me as much as might have bugged you guys, which is fair. In this novel does play up that contrast. I don't know if you guys have any further thoughts on that. Good.
Nope.
Speaking of the last point I want to get at, and Joel, you mentioned this, we've got into this a few times, but I really want to dig into it. What is this historical relationship to the late Republic? Does this change how, like we've brought up, change how the Nile Crisis compares to the Clone Wars? Does that still have to be absolutely wider? I think we agree it does. Joel, you're convinced more than ever that the High Republic is not the story of how the Jedi started to become like the prequel Jedi. Are you maybe still less convinced that it's not the story of how the galaxy comes to have, again, I mentioned this history of armed resistance to a Coruscant government, in the Outer Rim, the resentment of the Outer Rim. Again, I can see that the Jedi haven't retreated yet, like I thought they might have as much. But I'll let you go into that. Why would you say that it really isn't about getting from point A to point B?
Because the Republic's so good. Like, I love the Republic.
Right.
I want to fight for the Republic. I now know why the Alliance to Restore the Republic is called that.
Yeah.
The Nile they have no justification for armed rebellion, and outside of like we're just evil. Like what's the sin of the Republic right now? What's the bad thing the Republic's really doing? They don't seem to be ignoring their Outer Rim territories. They don't seem to be. They're not run by a Sith Lord. The Senate doesn't seem very corrupt. Where's the Amazon senator from Amazon Corporation? I don't see one yet.
There almost was one. I mean, Gira kind of represents that a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, but like to me, the Republic. This is why when the Rebel Alliance is fighting to restore a republic, this is what they're looking at. They're like, yeah, this thing used to work. It used to work really well just before the mega corporation got all greedy and stuff, and Palpatine and the Sith started doing their things. Like, yeah, there was a republic worth fighting for, the good old days. There was this golden age that Kenobi looks on fondly. It's like, yeah, we were the guardians of peace and justice, man. If this were written in today, it's like Elzar and Avar, like these were the good times. We had some problems, but like we did it. We were. This is what we look back on with like fondness and. Yeah, this is Captain America looking back at World War II. It's like, yeah, it was me, the boy, we fight Hydra, good times. I feel like the Winter Soldier of it all is going to happen with Acolyte. So yeah, that's just kind of my thing. It's like the Republic is too good. They're I don't see the sin yet of the Republic. Like what is
Don't see the
their
decline yet. Would
what
you
is
say? Is it fair to say then? What you're hoping to preserves is that Palpatine and the Separatists and I mean especially Palpatine is its own discrete story, and that they're primarily to blame. Because I do wonder if there's something about seeding habits of institutional memory into the Jedi and the Republic that lead to things, right?
I mean
And
it's
that's yeah, true.
possible, but again, it's like the Republic right now is like the Republic is strong. They're the reason why the Sith haven't done their revenge and struck. It's because no, the Republic is strong. They may have been surprised, but it's like no, they're still strong. They have not fallen. They
Right.
haven't. They're actually pretty good right now. I mean, maybe something at the end of. I mean, it's only the beginning, so I'm
Yeah.
willing to, of course, see where this all goes. But it's like, there's no like even suspicious like even the Guardian protocols don't seem that suspicious compared to like I don't know, let's hire this mega corporation and give them an army. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
what is I think this is the story to show not just the prequels, but even down to maybe even the post Return of the Rise of Skywalker era. It's like there could be a republic. It's like yeah, this republic thing is still worth it. And maybe when Rey's story is they're the Republican it's standing, and it'll be 15 years after Rise of Skywalker. But that's the reason why Luke fought for one. There's the reason why there might be one after Rise of Skywalker. Like, and this is the reason because this is the implication of like, yeah, this Republic thing used to be pretty cool. It can't be again.
No, what do you think about all that? I mean, in terms of, is this a discrete golden age? Is it a narrative of decline, or is it both and somewhere in between?
As I think it's the beginning of the end. The prequels is the end of the end. I think this is the beginning of the end, and I think we're seeing it. There was this idea to build, a more perfect union, the golden age of the Republic, and all of a sudden there were people out there that pushed back against it, and not just push back against it, but very violently and aggressively so. And now, when all is said and done, the Nile threat may be defeated, the storm wall is brought down, everybody wants to build a better future, but the memory of this is going to linger. The scars are going to stay, and people's appetite for progress may be severely cut off. And now it's a matter of looking inward instead of looking outward. And you're going to start looking inward, start making compromises in the name of security, in the name of this, in the name of that. And then, next thing you know, the corruption's going to settle in because people believed once and they got burned. And now they're like, oh, let's hold off. Let's hold off a little bit. Let's make our compromises. And, sooner or later, you're going to wind up in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
True, but again, we've got 100 years to go.
200, yeah.
200 years.
Got a long way, but it's Star Wars. Times, long periods are shrunk. Feel shorter because we can skip over whole eras. Yeah. But I think, yeah, it's an early beginning that puts us on the stepping stones towards the Phantom Menace.
It's probably a both and. I mean, I think, especially given the impact what the Stormwall can do, just the formidable nature of the Nile and Markian can have an impact long term, but also, I mean, it is true, right, that with John Jackson Miller's Living Force, we know that these Jedi, they look back and say, oh yeah, remember that time. They're also saying, I mean, that's the thing, we look back and say, remember that time, this great time. Just say, oh man, look at the compromises we've made now along the way. Look at where we are now. things just aren't the way the things just aren't the way they used to be, that kind of thing. I do think John Jackson Miller's Living Force, it is going to go into this more deeply, hopefully again from a very character perspective of Operensis and Yoda, and I guess who else is around. Ki-Adi-Mundi I think is around, all these council masters who remember this time. It's maybe we'll probably never get a definitive answer, but yeah, both end. I mean, and Joel, to your point, I mean, definitely, yeah, to say this is what the rebellion was trying to restore ultimately, not just the late Republic. That's very much true, right? Not just this time, at the end where clearly senators are corrupt and clearly a Sith Lord can just come up and say, "Hi, I'm going to take over now," without everyone knowing it, and say, here's the Republic. Go form an empire. Please keep us safe. Yeah. This with Lena So, like you were saying, the Force is more imbalanced. Not Lena So herself, but in this time,
the chosen one, like Leia, like Leia was going to be in George's sequels.
There's this is a time, I mean, I bring up the parallel with Boldly Going, right? Gene Roddenberry posits an age in the future, in our tracks a linear age in the future, and we can debate back and forth the merits of doing that, and or say both and about that. In universe, at least, it's very clear there is this. It is being set up both and. Yeah, how things go to Malachor.
I'm going to say though, I think those sort of implications are going to be a lot not as in your face as I think we might be. I know some people might hope for, or what I think they'll be a lot more subtle. I think it is kind of be the kind of maybe blink and you miss it, kind of like, oh, you don't really notice, which is a good thing because that's normally how these things go. It's normally you don't notice, like they don't know what's going to come in the future. They're just making the decisions based off what they know now. It's not like we, the reader, can go, there's going to be a Sith Lord coming. Don't do this. So
yeah. I mean, when we first started going back and forth about this, was kind of a blinker you'll miss it moment at the end of Eye of the Storm. Marky and Rose destroyed Starlight Beacon. All Jedi retreat to the Jedi Temple in Coruscant. When does that ever happen? And so I just think introducing that precedent. So I'll agree, Joel. I thought they'd be so much more hunkered down and so much more fearful. Clearly, that hasn't happened in this novel. Clearly, thankfully, it's a better story, right? I was and I'm glad I was wrong there. It's a better story to continue this tension from phase one. Do we stay or do we go? We had Avar and Vern and Keeve going out. Keeve's the only one who's really continuing this. I think Vern, we're going to see where she's at with the Fall of Starlight herself. There's still this tension. How do we confront this? How do we step out, both of the Jedi and the Republic? The creeping habits of let's play it safe, let's pull back, let's not get a wrist slap too much. It stings. I think that's gonna stick into it. Again, we know the way John Jackson Miller describes the Jedi Council at the Living Force. They're taking all this time trying to figure out how many angels of Iago can dance on the head of a force pin when there are people really struggling in the galaxy. So how do they get there eventually? Yeah, I agree, Joel. It's not going to be as explicit, but I'm going to enjoy reading into it as I do. It's again a question we're going to keep an eye on for sure. Finally, any final thoughts, especially on Eye of Darkness as we wrap this up? I will say before we do, just coming up in phase 3, we are getting Keeve and Lorna on the bordering planets. Keeve and Lorna, etc. They're duking it out on those bordering planets in Kevin's Marvel comic that comes out January 17th, February 21st. Zine is reunited with Lula. That was a wild moment in Daniel Jose Older's High Republic Adventures, January 17th and February 14th. So keep an eye on the tractor beam for all 4 of those comic issues. We're going to talk about those. Middle grade Escape from Vallow, Daniel Jose Older and Alyssa Wong. That comes out January 30th. And I think that's no, I forget who that's in that. We get Keeping Up with the Adrens, Sanderson, the Adrens in the original, in the Occlusion Zone, in Lydia Kang's short Insider 224. That's February 28th. Then Vernon Avon, they try to do both, chart away into the Occlusion Zone and learn more about the Neutralizing the Nameless, and that's in the young adult novel Defy the Storm by Tessa Gratton and Justine Ireland on March 5th. So that's the way forward. With that all in mind, going back to the Eye of Darkness, Dom, I'll let you throw it to you for your final thoughts on this novel and as it goes forward in High Republic.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, I thought this book was just terrific. I thought this was book of the year for Star Wars for sure, and one of the best Star Wars stories that we got this year. So, in terms of beginning phase 3 of the High Republic, and this is the real beginning. Those sort of the short stories and the comic books have done a nice job of prepping us for this, and they kind of have even been billed as kind of filling the gaps, but this is the starting point. And I don't think you could ask for a better starting point, a better jumping off point. And there's so much so much room for further twists and turns and excitement and great storytelling. So yeah, A++, great start. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. Again, Star Wars always works its best when it's a nerdy sci-fi historical story that's also character driven. Nerdy space fantasy, sports fantasy, space fantasy that is very character driven and plot driven in that way. And so, yeah, George Mann really nailed that. Brought us into the story through these characters. So yeah, really glad to have had it and glad to see what it sets up going forward. Joel, what are your final thoughts, and then you can take us out.
Yeah, well, Rise of the Red Blade is my book of the year for last year. You should read that one, Dominic. That's pretty good too. Yeah, this was a really good start to phase 3, especially as someone who didn't really read a lot of phase 1. It's like I wasn't lost at all. I really enjoyed Avar Chris as a character. And I was really well paced. I didn't feel like I was getting bored like I did with Light of the Jedi. It's like kind of felt like dragging a little bit, but like here it's like nope, they kept going. It's like it always got back to something fun if something was dragging a little bit. So yeah, lots of interesting setup, and of course, I'm curious to see how it all pays off and where we all stand when we finally get to that ultimate payoff next year. So yeah, this was great. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Matthew, for leading the conversation. We get to the script, and you know what? All right, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We had a lot of listeners today. Thank you for people in the comments who left comments. Double P Media and of course Skywalker Academy. Thank you so much. Let us know what you thought in the comments section below when this video is finally posted.
Comments are there.
Okay, yep. No, I mean in the actual comment section.
Yes, that too.
And of course, please do give this video a like and share. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you, Dominic, for joining us.
It was my pleasure. It was great fun to break down this book that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it was great. And of course, where can they find you?
You can catch me every week on the Star Wars Underworld podcast in that very studio over there. There it is. That one. Yeah, that one there. Recording, talking all things Star Wars. We'll have our first show of 2024 on January 4th, coming up on Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then it'll be in your podcast feeds shortly thereafter. And I think we're going to do an extended Ask the SWU segment. So we'll kind of kick it off by turning things over to the listeners. And you guys can tell us what you want us to talk about over there. So it'll be great fun.
About Star Wars.
And you can also subscribe to my Substack, Hoth Off the Press, DominicGJones.substack.com for my writings about Star Wars. And if you want like pictures and stuff, Dominic J25 on the Instagram.
Nice, very nice, as always. You can find me, of course, at JID2021 on Twitter, JID2021 on Twitter. And of course, I also do the Eye on Canon Twitter as well. Threads, well, Matthew does more threads, Instagram, all that good stuff. Matthew, where can they find you?
You can find me on, for now, I'm taking a bit of a break on social media, but I'm still there. Instagram and threads, MNEUG1138, Twitter, NEUG485, Twitter, Instagram, threads at on Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Also, of course, Tractor Beam this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Again, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. We can also find, of course, the flagship right here on the YouTube channel and on Underworld Facebook, Underworld and Ion Cannon Twitch, Ion Cannon Underworld Twitter. We're getting also, is where you can find Tractor Beam and Ion Cannon and all those other great places. You can also find this here podcast, Ion Cannon, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts sometime very shortly after we sign off.
Yes. And of course, check us all out on the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Please join us. Again, Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, we are beginning the grand chronological Star Wars Marathon Day 1. Woo! We're going to be doing this for probably many, maybe almost a year, maybe more. It's going to take a while, folks, but we're excited for this. I'm excited. So join us. Leave comments. I will always probably respond to you if you ping me in there.
Yeah, and that's in a dedicated. There's a specific server or channel you go to, right, for that.
We go to. Well, I mean, if you want to just talk to me, you can ping me in any channel. If we're
no, for the watch party.
Oh yeah. You go to the voice chat, and Ben will hopefully stream it for us. So yeah, we're excited for that. And I think I got all the plugs. So yeah, so next week we're going to be talking about some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. And no, we're not going to talk about Doctor Who. Although I would love to talk about Doctor Who. Would love to do Doctor Who podcasts. Maybe one day, Dominic, we just take over the show. We talk Doctor Who.
You kind of did for a bit there.
That's true. We almost did. We almost did. We could talk about the RTD2 era. That's actually what we're calling it. It's great. But we're going to talk about time and Star Wars storytelling. So timelines, time, storytelling, all that good stuff. So yeah, look us out for that, and let's blow this thing and head home.